Howdy, folks. I'm Jeff Gonzalez, former Navy SEAL, founder of Trident Concepts, and host of the Bulletproof Workshop, powered by AR15.com, where we discuss knowledge, skills, and ability to help bulletproof your everyday performance in whatever your field or passion. Welcome to Podcast 025. My next guest heads up one of the fastest growing industries within the firearm umbrella. We originally crossed paths well over a decade ago, discussing the state of night operations within the industry as a whole. At this point, TNVC was just opening their doors and quickly became the go-to for all things night. As if that wasn't enough, he also branched out to address the growing interest in the hunting at night world with various night vision capabilities through night goggles. Despite all the crazy, he is also an avid GTA sports car racer. He's a successful business owner, California exile, racer fanatic, book writer in waiting, and diehard freedom supporter. Please welcome to the show, Vic DiCosola. What's up, Vic?
Oh, man,
how's it going?
Jeff, I'm so glad we finally get together. Every time we see each other at SHOT Show, I'm like, man, we got to get together. Our schedules are so darn busy.
Yeah.
I'm really happy to be here. When I first saw you getting out of my car and I saw you and I said, man, brother, it's so good to see you. It is. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm so glad to talk with you.
Oh, man, I've been looking forward to this. You were kind of like one of the gets, the gets of the guests that we wanted. Like, we got to get these guys, and you were at the top of the list. And so we had some kind of like scheduling conflicts, but we eventually worked through it. So to see you sitting here in this studio is very much a happy kind of like way to end this year for us, because we're kind of getting ready for the holidays here. So, I'm not sure how many more podcasts we're going to get. So to know that you're kind of like the last one of the year and to finish it off at number 25, which was our milestone for the year, I couldn't have asked for anything better. So,
and I'm glad to be here. Austin's great. Texas is great.
Yeah.
An introvert from California, glad to get the hell out of that state. Living in Nevada now, but it's so good to see you, man. It's long overdue. We go way back, you and I.
It's true.
It's true. We'll talk a little bit.
Oh,
when
absolutely.
I first picked up the phone and called you. It's been a while.
Well, I can't wait to get into that. Let's start. I always like to start at the beginning, and so the beginning for me is like, where did you grow up? What did you do? Like tell us a little bit about, you in the formative years early on. But before you answer, let's take a quick little break to thank our sponsors.
Sure.
Folks, this show is sponsored by 1776 Insurance. We're talking about comprehensive firearms collection coverage. That also includes your accessories as well as knives. If you've got questions or you want to learn more, please visit 1776insurance.com. And we're back. Go ahead. Fire away.
So born and raised in Chicago, Illinois. Sorry to say, people. Well, not sorry to say. I won't say.
It's a great town.
I love where I grew up.
Yeah.
I grew up in a bad neighborhood. I did. Cameron Elementary School. You could look it up today. Wasn't a very good elementary school. Teachers were hard to find.
Wow.
It was scholastically. It always rated last.
Wow.
So I'm not complaining about my upbringing. My father was from Italy. And never graduated high school, but the smartest man I've ever met in my whole life, and I'll talk about that, why that is.
Can't wait.
He Body Carbonata on the eastern side of Rome, on Adriatic seaside. Survived World War II as a kid. Used to tell me about the bombs dropping.
Wow.
And Body, as the fascists, overtook Italy. He had a very, very poor upbringing. We were a very rich upbringing, even though we were very poor.
Yeah.
And my dad did everything. I didn't see him a lot. He worked nights all the time.
Wow.
And he was the hardest worker I've ever met, and one of the smartest men I've ever met. He's still running around he'll be 91 next week.
Oh my goodness.
Back in Chicago now. He was retired in Florida, but health was age was coming his way. And he's now living with my sister out in the Chicago area.
Gotcha. But
still doing well, still broken English, still speaks Italian dialect, and he's a great man. So growing up in Chicago was, challenging as a young guy, and I am from the city. I'm not a suburbanite. People say from the city. I'm like, where are you from the city? Well, I'm from Hoffman Estates or Elgin. I go, it's the suburbs. No, I grew up in the city, and when the neighborhood did get very, very bad, my dad scraped up all the pennies he could, our family, and we moved out to the suburbs. So went in this did a suburbanite thing through high school, kicked and screamed, because once you grow up in the city of Chicago, it's great. I mean, I miss the city. It's a great home. Everything we did out there was in the city. All my friends, everything we did. And it's just, it's something about being a city guy. was different. And it's funny, but I never grew up with any firearms. You know, it was the Mayor Daley Democratic thing. Nobody was allowed to have guns, and I had a fascination for firearms as a young kid.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, and you know the funniest part, the only reason that the first thing I did was when I got out of California, the first weapon I bought was an MP5 SD. Full authentic MP5 SD.
Wow.
I went into the gun shop in Nevada and screamed, I am free, when I got my Nevada license, right? And bought my first machine gun. It was fantastic.
Oh my God.
The wait was it killed me. 8 months I had to wait. But we weren't allowed to have firearms in Chicago. You know, Mayor Daley run, you know, firearms to this day is very restricted. And what got me to like the MP5 SD, obviously, growing up was the 1978 or 79 London embassy raid, with British SAS went plowing through the windows and raided that, and they all had their MP5 SD repelling into the building.
Yep.
I was hooked ever since then. Since then, it was very cool, and always wanted to go in the Navy and wanted to be a Navy SEAL guy like you, an NSW. And, I went in the Air Force instead.
Interesting.
You know, growing up, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I got in broadcasting. I was doing radio stuff.
You're kidding.
Worked at nightclubs, and we'll get into that too. But one day I didn't know what I was going to do, and growing up in Chicago, I saw my dad was a factory worker, and college wasn't for me at the time. It really wasn't. Academically, scholastically, I was lacking. Back in the day, I didn't care about school. It took me summer school to pass high school.
No kidding.
To pass history class, to go to summer school to graduate.
Oh my goodness.
I'd rather play foosball and, you know, drink Budweisers than go and go to Wrigley Field and watch the Chicago Cubs, and I did want to go to school.
Oh.
It was like Ferris Bueller's Day Off for me when I grew up in Chicago. I ditched school and I was in Wrigley Field and sitting in the bleachers watching the Chicago Cubs every chance I could.
Oh my God! First of all, the fact that you could just do that and just check out of school and head over to the field and
open
watch
campus back in the day, right?
Oh yeah. That's just so like. First of all, that I'm pretty envious of that, because that was cool. Like I had when growing up, I had a fascination with the Cubs too. I liked the Cubs. Like as a kid, my ball clubs. It all depended on what teams I played on in Little League. So there was a 2-year stint where I played on the Cubs, and we won back-to-back championships. So I was a Cubs fan. So I started watching all the Cubs, and then I moved to the next team I was on was the Yankees. We didn't have this good of luck. I think it took us 4 years before we finally won a championship. So, but I stuck with the Yankees, from there on out. So the fact that you can actually just go to a game and sit down and watch it.
It was awesome.
Yeah, I just and back then too, Wrigley Field was, I think, probably one of the most open fields that you could be at. Like the low walls, and
no lights. Parking in residential neighborhoods and walking in the park. It was just great. Getting off the L train right there at Wrigley Field, and just hot dogs were 50 cents, and Heinekens were $1.25, and we're 16 eating hot dogs and drinking Heinekens at 16. And don't do that. But I just said
that's wrong, children. That's wrong. Very wrong.
Very wrong.
God.
So when I see Ferris Bueller's Day Off, I just laugh. And I didn't tell my son, who just turned 21 not too long ago, about my exploits at Wrigley Field. He just shook his head. Yeah, Dad, I knew you just weren't an angel out there.
Oh, that's true. That's so funny. So you mentioned something about the fascination with firearms growing up. Was there something in particular that kind of like movie, like you said, the embassy?
It was the embassy siege when I was in high school.
Okay.
Junior in high school was it. And I was always intrigued by the special operations when I was a young guy. My family, not liking firearms in that regard. Not that they were evil, they just thought they were dangerous because they didn't have any education in that regard.
That's normal. But
they were very, very pro-military. No one ever served in the military when my dad was in the Korean War as a cook, and a lot of guys from Italy came in. They all got drafted obviously in the Korean War back in the late 50s or mid 50s, somewhere in there. But it was never in our household, and our surrounding friends and neighbors never had firearms.
Interesting.
No one ever did, and it was just me having that fascination, watching all the special operations. Always intrigued by the British SAS guys growing up and the weapons that they use. And I always had a good technical interest. I didn't have a technical background, but at that time I had a very technical interest in things technical. So when I decided, I always tell the story when I went in the military, it was truly divine intervention. It truly was. Because
in what way?
I was working in the radio business. I was doing some DJ stuff, working at small radio stations. The reason I had all that luxury to go to Wrigley Field is because we had open campus and had a 4-hour radio class in the afternoon. And
4
so
hours?
4 hours. So I did study hall at the beginning, study hall at after. So after lunch, it was open array. And so we tell a program director, hey, we're going downtown and do an interview. We'll be back. And here we are at the Cubs games.
That's hilarious.
So it was just to a point where radio is tough business. Communication and broadcasting is tough. It still is.
Really?
It's hard to get a job somewhere that paid the bills. And
Interesting.
And in the time of working in broadcasting, I was also working at an office products place right out of high school because, like I said, college wasn't for me at the time. And I decided, I wanted to get in broadcasting, but it was very competitive, very tough, and I didn't know I was going anywhere with it. And just working at an office products place. And one day, true story, driving home. I remember it was very cold that day in the winter, like it is in January.
Yeah.
I saw a recruiting station driving on the way home, and it was Airforce, Navy, Marines, and the whole Army. And so I said, what the hell? And I pulled in. I don't know. Something just told me. I looked over, never even thought about it, and
way.
I just kind of pulled in.
How old were you?
19.
No way.
19. So I went in, and I saw the recruiter. And, we did a little aptitude test, which I know I didn't do very well at. He gives me the look like, well, would you like to
We
do?
need cooks here, too.
Yeah, I want to fly. I said, I want to fly. I had a fascination. I wanted to fly. I always wanted to be a pilot, to do something in that realm. And, he just looked at me and said, okay, we'll see what we can do. And I went back about a week later and did the test and everything else, the written test. And we decided that I was unsure, and I didn't say anything to my family. So I went back home, and I was sitting at the kitchen table. My Italian family, very close knit.
Yeah.
And everybody's sitting around. In Italian families, you always sit together and have dinner. That's what it was. And I just blurted out. I said, "I'm joining the Air Force. I'm going in." I didn't know what the reaction was to anybody, and it got real quiet.
I was just gonna say.
And my dad looked at me and broke into a big, big smile. And he said, I am so proud of you. And to this day, he was shocked. He goes, who told you to go in the Air Force? And he thought I didn't know what I was going to do. I wasn't a bad kid. I wasn't really in a lot of trouble with friends, but I didn't know what my path was going to be. And he was very proud. He was very, very big grin from ear to ear. He's so proud. So a week later, I went and took my physical. I did all that thing, the eye test, and then they find out they dropped the bomb on me. You're colorblind. I'm like, what do you mean I'm colorblind? So, you read the dots in the books, and you got to tell them what number pops out at you. I think I missed 2 or 3 of them, but you got to have perfect color vision, right?
Yeah.
To qualify for the job, or fly, or
Yeah.
qualify for any other job.
Interesting.
ATC, I want to do combat control. I want to do all that stuff. I want to qualify for any of that stuff, either ATC, air traffic control, fly, or do anything in the aviation end of it. And sorry, we can't get you in because you're colorblind. I'm like, I can see colors just fine, right? I'm 19 years old. I'm a colorblind. So I got to be a sheet metal guy. Put me in sheet metals. I can work on airplanes. And I was kind of disappointed because I really wanted to fly or air traffic control, do a technical end of it. But as we talk about, my career in the Air Force was pretty amazing what happened to me in the Air Force. So
Interesting.
That's so I entered the Air Force in 1981, May of 1981.
Wow.
And I was very fortunate what I did. I was a sheet metal guy, and I went in. It was really tough for me. And I'm not even afraid to admit this on camera, but the first time I got to my barracks at Norton Air Force Base in San Bernardino, never been away from home in my life, right? Ever, right? As you get deployed, we just went there, and you get dropped off. Some guy picks you up in a car over there at Ontario Airport in near San Bernardino, California, and drops me off in my barracks and said, your building's over here, a little map, report there at 0700. And I remember sitting on my bunk in my little cot, and I looked around, and I just about started bawling. And it was the first time on my own, and I said to myself, I said, if I F up, I'm going to jail. This is the real deal here. I got to go to work. If I mess up, it's not like I can call in sick.
No
all
Wrigley
that
games for me.
No, yeah, right. And that whole reality, kind of came right on top of my head. Never been away from home in my life. Never been on my own. Right. Always had mom and dad. Putting up food and putting a roof over my head. It was a scary time.
So it's interesting to hear you say that. So the 80s, again, great time.
Yeah.
Love that time period. When you came home, obviously, like you said, divine intervention, drove past the recruiters, something just called me in there and just did it. And I think a lot of times, that intuition, that gut feeling is something that we often kind of like repress.
Yeah.
And I had a very similar kind of experience not necessarily the divine intervention aspect of it, but at least my gut telling me what I wanted to do. Like I knew this was, and there were a lot of roadblocks like yours. I had a lot of roadblocks, but ultimately I'm like, no, I want to do this. This is what I want to do. I was a little bit younger when I enlisted, so I didn't tell my parents about anything until, again, I was at the dinner table. Similar thing, quiet, crickets. Right. And then, well, what does that mean? I'm like, well, I'm gonna leave on Monday. This was like Thursday or like Wednesday or Thursday the week before. I leave on Monday to go to boot camp. So, when you were like faced with that new reality, as you said, like. That's a big step for so many people. In today's world, it's so watered down.
Especially as a young teenager.
Yeah, exactly.
Growing up in the city.
So what were some of your, I guess, lessons learned about how you coped with that new reality for you? It
was sink or swim.
Yes.
It was sink or swim. Literally, Jeff, it was sink or swim. The old saying about it makes a man out of you overnight?
Yeah.
It really does in the military. I profess anybody, parents out there, even my son, I mean, if you want to grow up in a hurry overnight, after basic training, it's going to happen. I mean, basic training was actually amusing. Got more trouble for laughing than I did anything. That didn't bother, the pressure didn't bother me at all.
Interesting.
But it was sink or swim when I got out. And I remember in basic training, after basic, it was different then in the Air Force in 81. They call themselves the PJs now, but those special operation PJs and the phenomenal guys, right? The guys who, don't get mad at me when I say this, the guys that rescue the SEALs when they're drowning, right?
Yeah.
So,
That's true.
Yeah. So I remember after basic, after the 8 weeks, whatever it was, 6 weeks, we had all the pararescue guys come on in and showed us a video, and they gather all the new recruits and looking for recruits to be a pararescue guy.
Interesting.
You didn't have to serve a certain amount of time. It was right after basic. You're in your graduation ceremony. They turn the lights on. They show you this video, guys,
cool.
Doing all their things. And I always thought I was going to maybe do that when I was in the Air Force. But I remember after that video, looking what those guys did, and I'm not afraid to admit, I'm like, there is no way I would ever do that. That is nuts. And they were like shouting, who wants to be a real man today and come join us in the real challenge of your life?
No gauntlet thrown there.
No, thanks. I just kind of, want to get away. I just had my head down. I didn't want to be involved. It was weird. It wasn't like calling anymore like it was when I really saw what those guys did.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, no. When I was a young guy, I'm like, no, I think I'll be just fine sitting in the background, working and punching rivet holes and everything else.
That's hilarious. So. I can remember there was and I'm sure some of the guys remember this. Some of the team guys from my era remember this. But there was this promo video very similar to the one that you saw. And all I remember is these guys they're riding a helo in, and it's like an old helo. It's like a Huey.
Yeah.
It's not even a twin. It's a single turbine, and they come in and they fast rope out. And they're all storming like this bunker-ish kind of building. They're shooting people as they're coming down the kind of like the walkway to the door. They blow this door. They go in. I think they like blew up some sort of like communications like center or some nucleus center there. And then as they're extracting out, you just see this like total like poorly, poor visual effects explosion of the compound that they were just in, and they get back on the helo and they take off and they go away. And it was just like, I was like, oh yes,
cool stuff.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. When do we do that? And they're like, yeah, you're not gonna do that for a while.
Right.
Like a long while.
But in the Air Force, it was, you could go do it. They were going to pluck you right out.
That's hilarious.
It was back in 81, and they plucked you. We were going to pluck you right. Whoever you raised your hand, you're gone. They were taking you.
You're in the pipeline.
Yeah, it was. It wasn't
Wow.
like you had to serve a certain amount of time. They were looking for recruits right then and there.
Yeah. That was a good time. That was a good time to be in special operations. The 80s certainly was a good time because
at the height of the Cold War.
It totally was.
Yeah.
Not only that, but I think there was some really smart people that had the future vision to know that the next generation of warfighting was going to be that low intensity conflict where special operations was going to really kind of gain a foothold. So
it did.
Something like recruiting right out of basic was a huge kind of like, like a smart move on the part of big Air Force, if you will.
And a part that I didn't want was really, I'm not afraid to admit
That's
it. Like, I wanted no part of that.
Well, okay, so would you consider that to be kind of like the hardest part of growing up for you?
It
like
was.
That time period?
It was the Air Force. It was going in. in the Air Force. It was very scary for me because I always had mom and dad, right?
Yeah.
Even though I'm a city guy and, being in the
I mean, it's a
streets
tough
of Chicago.
town. That's not an easy place to grow up.
No,
you know?
it isn't, but you always had your friends with you, right?
Yeah.
Watching your back, right?
Yeah.
You had a mom and dad bailing you out if you needed to, and
Their
your friends
whole
always
network
there.
of friends and family members.
I had nobody.
Yeah.
Nobody. And it was scary times. I'm not afraid to admit that either.
That's awesome, though. I mean, the interesting thing about that is, it like I love how your perspective was. It was sink or swim. There's no other choice for me. I have to be successful. Their failure is not an option in a sense. I've got to do this to make it to where I need to go. And sometimes I feel like being put in that situation, maybe some people are not conducive to that, but you don't know who those people are until they're in that situation. And then you find out, okay, these are the people that actually take the opportunity to rise to the occasion.
Yeah.
So clearly that was something that happened in your case. And on top of that, it also helped to streamline your direction. Like you saw some avenues that were at first tantalizing and then no, thank you. I'll pass.
Yeah.
So, like as you kind of so we're starting your military career, but was there something back in your childhood that you looking back now kind of like was I guess foreshadowing of this route that you were going to take?
There wasn't. It really wasn't.
I mean, I guess that's what divine intervention really is.
I was about to say it was divine intervention. Something told me, and it's the truth. Something told me in my heart, and I think now I'm a man of faith, and I think back then, my faith back then wasn't near what it is today as a man of faith.
100%.
But I knew now, thinking back on that, that shouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
Because of my normal views of the city, hanging out with my buddies. And I remember even going back 10 years ago and seeing some of my buddies back in Chicago. Some have died doing goofy stuff, right? Being drunk, getting hit by cars.
Yeah.
And it's like a time warp out there. I remember going to my favorite hot dog stand on Grand and Pulaski, Jimmy's Hot Dogs, 8 years ago. And the same guys are probably my age now. And looking at me, Vic, where you been? You still in La La Land? California and L.A.
Oh, my God, that's hilarious.
Goes, man, how long you been gone now? A few years out of Chi-Town now? And I'm like, dudes, I've been gone for 35, 40 years now. And it's just like a time warp. Everybody's drinking old-style beers. They're still in their stoops in Chicago. And it's a good life for them. They're with family. They bring their kids up, working a blue-collar job, and nothing wrong with that. But it's almost like you're stuck in a time warp back then. It's just,
I could see that.
It's just different.
Yeah.
And I guess as I progressed, it was just I outgrew that lifestyle, whatever, if that makes sense. It was
Totally.
I wanted to do more with my life and then just do that. Nothing wrong. My dad was a blue-collar worker, come from Italy, right?
Yeah.
Put all the food on our table. We weren't silver spoon-fed in that regard. And I just wanted to do more. And I thought the military at the time, I was going to do more with my life when that thunderbolt struck me and said, just go and do it. The hardest part, like I said, was I always thought, though, after the Air Force, I was going back home. After 4 years or whatever, I wasn't planning on staying in 20.
Yeah.
After 4 years, I'm going back home.
No kidding.
I'm going back to Chicago.
No
so
kidding.
it as I progressed and flash forward, the story was a few other things that formed my professional career was I got out of the Air Force, and I was very, very blessed and fortunate to work on the F-117, the stealth fighter, long before anybody knew about it. And only because I was very, very good at I did it my job, and they sent me on
So wait a minute,
TNVC.
you started punching metal, and you
Yeah.
made your way up to the stealth fighter?
Yeah, well, by accident, because I was kind of I think I did my job incredibly well, but the city came out on me in the Air Force. Never kept my hair short.
Yeah.
I never did a lot of things. Kept my uniform clean. After I got done working on an aircraft on a flight line, you're supposed to clean the truck up or sweep the floor. I was in a Mac Air passenger terminal eating cheeseburgers, doing what I'm not supposed to do. But I did my job incredibly well, and it was my shop chief and a few others I met. And a lot of people this day still don't know. I went TDY a lot at Norton, and that Norton Air Force Base was, you can even read about it, was the actual cover story in the ballistic missile office to get you briefed of the 117.
No way.
Back in the day. So I was very lucky and fortunate, and right before I got out, 2 years prior, to work on an aircraft, TDY, and I went up to a place called TTR, Tonopah Test Range, out of Nellis Range.
No
And
way.
I got my first working with goop and different type of materials to support that new airplane. And it paved the way for the rest of my life in the DoD aerospace arena.
In what way? And how?
So getting out, obviously, I got out in 85 or so.
So about 4 years.
Yeah, it was really difficult to go marching up to Lockheed and said, "Hey, I worked on your blue F-117 stealth fighter. I want to go work for you." Right? I would have got put in jail for using the words low observable or stealth or anything. Those were taboo. They were classified TS, SSB, ICI type stuff you can't even talk about back in the day. So I couldn't work what I did in the Air Force the last couple years. So as I got out, I worked for Hughes Space and Communications. Worked on the one of the space shuttles back in the day.
No way.
Did composite. I learned composites is what I did. Went from sheet metal to composites. Graphite composite layups and things like that. And did a lot of aircraft battle damage repair. And so went to Hughes Space and Com. Typical aerospace, as we talk about, every 10 years it's up and down, up and down.
Yeah.
So only lasted probably a year at Houston Space, got laid off there. Had another odd and end composite job, local area, got laid off there, and I decided, leads up to my dad's the smartest man in the world, I decided, to hell with this, I'm going back to Chicago. I shouldn't have stayed. I made the decision because I wanted to, have a living.
Yeah.
It was very hard to stay in California area and something, even though it was the mecca of aerospace.
Yeah.
I stayed, didn't go back to Chicago, broke my rule, and then I kicked myself. I said, I should have just went back. So 5.5 years into it, 4 years in the Air Force, a year and a half later, I said, I packed my belongings, packed my little Toyota MR2 up, and I took off across Highway 80 back to Chicago. I said, I'm never going back to La La Land. I'm done with this. So what do? I fall back on my my DJ and broadcasting and worked at the hottest nightclub in Chicago at like 25 years old. What? Working at the hottest nightclub in Chicago, right? Getting wined and dined from older women, buying you bottles of Dom Perignon. I'm working at the hottest nightclub in downtown Chicago as a DJ at a dance club, and I'm having the time of my life, right?
What was it called?
Snuggery.
Snuggery?
The Snuggery. And I ran into somebody, Jeff, 3 weeks ago that I kind of met in business dealings. I told them where I worked, and there was Mothers, and I forgot the other Chicago place across, and then there's a Snuggery, and it's shaped like a triangle. The 3 clubs on Rush Street, Russian Division. And I said, I used to work down there, and I said, man, are all the young people still down there? And he looked at me and he said, Vic, he goes, you know what we call that place now? The Viagra Triangle.
Oh, my God.
I just said, you got to be kidding me.
Oh,
like,
my God.
That makes me feel real young, right? The Viagra Triangle. They called it 3, and they're still there.
Oh, my God.
So just funny stuff. So I'm having a time of my life in Chicago working at the hottest nightclub. You didn't have to worry about walking to your car in the middle of the night to go home. And still living with my mom and dad. They lived in the suburbs. I just, same house, and I would just drive into Chicago and work at the nightclub. So about a year and a half go by, and Northrop calls me. A friend of mine, an old engineer I knew, is working at Northrop now, and calls me on the phone. We didn't have cell phones back then. Calls me on the phone and says, hey, we have an opportunity, and with your experience, we think we might have a fit for you here, back here in Northrop at Pico Rivera, California. And I said, thanks, but no thanks. Kind of basically hung up the phone. I said, I ain't going back there, out of their minds. So my dad got wind of the conversation and said, who was that? And I said, it's just company called Northrop. I don't know. They just want me to go back, do some work. I said, I'm not going back. I'm not leaving home, Dad. And he didn't say much. And about a week later, my friend, his name is Joe, called me back again and said, hey, Colonel Hatton used to work on his U-2 a while back, knows you're available, and he has an aircraft battle damage repair lab out here at Northrop. He wants you to head it up, and we really want you to come out here to talk with you about it. I said, Joe, I really don't want to do that, and I'm having a time of my life. I didn't tell him what I was doing.
Yeah.
Finally, we hung up again. My dad said, are you going to be spinning records at 50 years old? Once again, my dad, the smartest man in the world, right? Just look, you have that look like, damn, he's right again,
yes.
right?
Damn, foiled again.
Right, all these years, very street smart man. I'm like, you just rolled my eyes, and I'm like, I don't know, but yeah, I guess so. They flew me back, wine and dined me for a couple days, and couldn't tell me what it was all about, what I'd be working on, and I went back, declined the offer, which was a damn good offer back in 1986, 1987, declined the offer, said, nah, it's not really for me, and went back home again. So
did you decline it because you were...
Didn't want to leave home.
Okay.
Didn't want to leave home again.
Okay.
Big Italian family, very close-knit family, cousins and Italian, all, everybody spoke Italian at the house. They're all from Italy. We had a very close-knit Italian family. and declined the offer again.
Wow.
So once again, a week 2 weeks go by, Joe comes back, and I wrote him a letter, said, no, I'm not interested. And Joe wrote and he thought it was the money situation. So then they got me even more money.
Oh my God.
Wrote me again, and this time they're giving me, almost like 15 to 20 grand more than they offered me to begin with. And that's a lot of money back for me back in the late 80s,
Yeah.
as a 26-year-old, 25-year-old, something like that. And finally, my dad said, why don't you just give it a try for a year, right? Smartest man in the world. He goes, why don't you just give it a try and, for a year and see what happens. You don't like it, then leave. And I said, Dad, I don't want to be away from my family. I don't want to be away from my brothers and, my sisters and my cousins and everyone else. And so I took the job. I packed all my car up, and my roommate, who was a cop in San Bernardino, decided, I'll come meet you. And he drove back with me, and it turns out I was working for the Northrop B-2 bomber program. I got briefed in the very first super secret B-2 bomber program.
No way.
Back in 1987. It was very cool. I remember looking at the aircraft when they unveiled it to me, and they had just a plywood full-size mock-up.
No way.
That was in this big indoor hangar in Pico Rivera, California, and I went in looking at this bat wing, and I remember the back of my hair is coming in the back of my neck, and I said, when is World War III starting?
Yeah,
right?
no kidding.
Because it was built as a low penetrator to actually invade the Soviet Union in case of a nuclear war. It was a low altitude penetrator to get rid of their mobile ICBM. So very, very intriguing and very spooky aircraft when I first saw it. And then I think I told you before the show, my boy's making fun of me because I think the B-23 is getting unveiled in a couple of weeks out at Northrop Plant 42. And he said, Dad, that B-2 you worked on, that's an old airplane. Mind you, I have several patents on that airplane, right? And now the B-23 is coming out, and all of a sudden the B-2 is just old, right?
Yeah.
Even though it's a cool billion dollars to build that airplane.
Jesus.
So that's how the paveway started, and I was involved with mostly classified programs until I started, flash forward, almost before I started TNVC. I finally got hired back at at Lockheed Skunk Works out of
No
Plant
way.
42, yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it was very cool. So I finally got back to Lockheed in 1998, and I started TNVC part-time 2003 and left Lockheed in 2005. Another big decision I had to make, but my career was always with low observable aircraft before. I went to the B-2 division. I went to McDonnell helicopter, A-12 program, advanced cruise missile, light helicopter program. Because I left there. I've been around the whole block and the whole thing.
How was that?
It was just, I got married, and my wife wanted me to go to Arizona, so I went to Mesa, and McDonnell helicopter was out there, and they just approved the A-12, the Flying Dorito, the ATA program. So did that in aerospace, a real highly classified program. And that lasted only about a year and a half. And the CEO, about a year and a half later, Dick Cheney cut the ATA, he cut the light helicopter, and he cut the ACAM program, the Advanced Cruise Missile, all within 1 week of each other. And we all got laid off over the intercom. So,
oh, you're shitting me.
Yeah, so I come back, newly married and had my tail between my legs. Here I go back to California, now what am I going to do? So my roommate was already a cop in Southern California. So I did the reserve thing, became a reserve police officer for a while, did that. Thought I was going to go full-time for a while, just about did. And the sad part is my roommate got killed on duty. So I had to face that, right? So, he got killed on duty, best friend, roommate. So I had to face that in 92. And I said, maybe this law enforcement stuff isn't for me anymore, right?
Way, yeah.
They ran one-man units in Southern California. We had the highest murder rate per capita, and we ran one-man units. It was terrible.
Wow.
Left that, didn't want to do that anymore. And
I can't say I blame you.
yeah, still didn't want to go back in aerospace. It's topsy-turvy. So I started working for a grocery market in security doing white-collar crime. That was cool. So I did that for a while, but kind of fell back in my investigation type things.
No way.
And did that for like 3 or 4 years. And then my buddy, who almost in your class, he was a crypto guy for Team 6 back in the day.
Oh, wow.
Right after Richard Masinko.
Wow.
He was out at Norfolk, and he didn't go to Buds, but he did all the crypto stuff.
Yeah.
For the teams.
Yeah,
it was very cool. And I know I'm talking a lot, but there's another great story, a true story that happened with him.
No way.
He brought me to Norfolk when I was working at Northrop, and I had my creds, and I always had long hair down here, and the generals hated it. When I go to the Pentagon, they'd shake my hand, look at my hair. It was hilarious. So I went to Norfolk with him. He invited me out there because I was on business already with the B-2 division doing some induction heating work we're doing to cure things. And so I knew he was in the Navy. Never knew what he did. He went in the Navy at the same time I did. Both grew up in Chicago.
No way.
I went in the Air Force first, and he decided, I'm going to go to the military because Vic's going. So he went in the Navy and he was very, very smart. He didn't even know. He did crypto stuff. Never went through buds, but he did the crypto stuff. So he's at Norfolk, and I go rolling in. And I remember he got me to kind of look at his compound where the guys were in Norfolk. And I had never seen a submarine or an aircraft carrier or a battleship.
Oh, wow.
And he goes, we're going to take you to the dock and look around. So I remember going into his compound and went to his apartment. And all I saw was 115 grain 9mm silver tip everywhere. Their closets were like, I don't know why they had all this ammunition. I was like, man, you guys sure shoot a lot here.
Yeah.
So he just kind of shrugged it off. And then I remember looking at his compound. I couldn't go in, but there's these 55-gallon drums everywhere, these steel garbage drums. And there was one inside the compound. He lifted it up, and it was just filled with, once again, 9mm, 115 grain silver tip, which I found out later. It's all they shot in their MP5 SPs, right? So didn't know. So I knew he knew somebody because another unbelievable true story that happened. We're at the docks looking at the aircraft carriers that are docked there, and I'll never forget, there is the USS Jacksonville, a 688 attack boat that's sitting at the dock, and some sailor down, the young sailors, there was M16. It's kind of drizzling now. It's like 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning. And my buddy goes up to the dude and says, to the sailor, and says, hey, man, we want to get a tour of your boat. You think you can make that happen? I looked at my buddy. I said, man, you're going to get a shot. I said, no. He doesn't really mean that.
Yeah.
I said, I can't believe you asked that, dude. And I see the guy's grip on his M16 tighten, and he looked at me with my long hair almost down to my shoulders.
Yeah.
My buddy, who's got a beard, who's got kind of long hair, and he looked at my buddy, goes, you got an ID with that attitude?
Oh, nice one.
So my buddy flips out his ID. He looks at the front. He looks at the back, he looks at his hair, and he goes, and what's your story? Looking at me. I got my DOD badge, I got my Northrop badge, and I got my license, and I give him my license. He goes, are you in the military? I said, no, I work for Northrop and the DOD. And he goes, you got something with that story too? And I said, yep. And I gave it to him, and he took down both their social security numbers. You know, his is, I think he just took mine. And he took them and said, you mind if I keep these for a few hours? I'm like, okay. He goes, well, once you come back about 1400, I'll see what I could do for you. I'm like, no way. So right then I knew my buddy had to be involved with somebody or somewhere or some unit that had to at least have some pull somewhere.
Yeah.
So we go back, we get some lunch, we go back at 2 o'clock, and here's the guy down at the end of this boat, and he said, skipper says it's good, come on in.
Oh, my God.
Unbelievable, Jeff. We got minus the missile silos, and they had the shields over the center console where all the sonar is. We got a top-to-bottom tour of a 688 USS Jacksonville in the height of the Cold War. It's
wow.
Best tour I've ever got in my whole life.
Wow.
So, and that's how I knew my buddy was kind of, man. I mean, still didn't know he was part of the SEAL groups or the NSW, what he did, and the encryption and all that stuff. I found out very later on.
Interesting.
He got in right when Marcinko left, I guess, with the SEAL guys, and then he was in the group and did all the comms and did all the crypto for those guys.
Very cool.
Yeah, very cool.
So that was about what time?
1988.
1988 still.
Yeah,
okay.
USS Jacksonville, 688 attack boat. I think it's still in service too.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
Quick word from our sponsor. We've been working with the folks at 1776 for comprehensive insurance of our firearms collections, and I'm really happy with how things are going so far. And one of my concerns is with the amount of commuting that I do with my firearms collection. What happens should my vehicle be broken into or stolen with my firearms? And there's reason to have this concern because there's 800,000 vehicles stolen per year in America. So it's not, it's a little bit more common than we might think. What I mentioned earlier is that they have a comprehensive insurance plan, which is that they will cover your firearms stolen out of your vehicle, or should your vehicle be stolen, cover the firearms that were in the vehicle. So that's pretty reassuring in a sense. So I've mentioned this before, but the process to apply is pretty easy. Approval is pretty quick. They do not require you provide a itemization or serialized numbers. There's no appraisal or schedules that you have to provide. So really all you want to do is just make sure you have proof of ownership, and that's it. So if you want to learn more about the folks from 1776 and insuring your firearms collection, visit 1776insurance.com. Okay, so you are now looking at like employment options now for you were what?
So that was still, I backed up. That was still at Northrop. So I was still there. It's still 1988. So I started there in 87, left in 91 when I went to McDonnell Douglas in Arizona.
Okay.
I just want to tell this story because my buddy was a sailor. So then we left Northrop on my own, went to McDonnell Douglas helicopter, got laid off, and came back. And then worked in white collar crime. I'm a roommate, and I was doing a law enforcement gig for a while. He got killed, and I decided that I was going to. My wife thinks I should write a book, all the exploits of what I've been involved with.
Kind of an interesting.
It's been cool. So, but we'll get to the point with the night vision where everything kind of paved the way. Where it was weird. Once again, divine intervention. There were so many puzzle pieces that were the building blocks of what I do today. It's pretty amazing what happened. So, did the white collar crime stuff. My buddy,
what does that mean when you did the white collar crime? What were you actually doing? Just like conducting surveillance on other people?
Yeah. So at the stores or whatever it was, if they were taking money or doing whatever it was, if managers were taking money, I'd set up hidden cameras and things like that. Which was very cool. So a lot of fun, which I started using night vision basically for the first time doing that.
No way.
Yeah. So this is in 1994. Somewhere in there, 93, 94, I started using like Gen 2, late Gen 2. Gen 3 was just not coming out yet, 93, 94, somewhere in there. And I was using night vision aided 8mm cameras and things.
No way.
One of the coolest jobs I ever did was, believe it or not, we had the major grocery chain in Southern California was getting their ice cream loads. Somebody they think were sabotaging ice cream loads in their trailers. You know, they have the reefer coolers.
Yeah.
And people think, it's ice cream. But each one of those reefer trucks had $30,000 worth of ice cream in it. Well, they were finding out at this warehouse that all of a sudden these reefers were just getting turned off and they were losing loads of ice cream.
Oh, shit.
So it was cool. They said, Vic, this is what we think what's happening. You need to get into this warehouse, come up whatever store you want, with security, and we'll spread the word that, this is the true, you're going to be whatever you come up with to get in.
No way.
And do surveillance where all these reefers were parked around the warehouse. But I had to get up on that roof so I can look down, right? So I went in with a suit and tie, and I said I was some building engineer from the market company, and I was doing this, and I had my briefcase. In that briefcase, they had my night vision, my Panasonic 8mm camera, and wearing a suit and tie, telling those guys I was just there as an engineer looking at building codes and stuff like that.
Oh, cool.
At night. It was very cool. So it was my way to get in the door, and once I got in, I had a blueprint of the building. It was fairly new. Found out where the ladders were and the hatches. They were all unlocked for me. They had to make sure they got them unlocked. And went upstairs on the roof and got to look down at the reefers of who was doing what, and actually caught somebody actually turning off the reefers. And it turned out, long story short, he was a disgruntled employee.
Oh.
His brother got fired or whatever, and he purposely, I was there for almost 2 weeks until I found the guy. It was a lot of work at night, and I finally found a guy who was turned off the reefer to make sure the load was gonna fail. So cool stuff. It was a cool job.
That is kind of cool.
Yeah, it was cool. So that's where I got kind of my first taste of using a lot of night vision. It was an old 8mm Panasonic, the Panasonic video cams.
Yeah.
And then I had my Gen 2 device out in front of that, and looking through that through the night vision. I had a tripod because there was so much weight, and I had a special rings made for the lens of the Panasonic 8mm.
Yeah.
So I'm doing surveillance with that camera because it's dark out there, where the reefers were at.
Yeah.
So I got to film this guy doing what he was doing. So, the CEO of the grocery market, I was his best friend. We caught the guy doing it. I got to interview him, obviously, and why he did what he did. So that was my first taste of night vision. That kind of paved the way of, I didn't know I'd be using that later on. But it was early, late Gen 2, early Gen 3.
Yeah, sure.
And the company I bought it from, and they're still around today, is NATE, North American Integrated Technologies. Yeah, they supplied my first Gen 2 device back in the day.
Wow.
So, yeah, Nate's a good company, and if they're watching right now, I still admire that company. They've been around and they've stood the test of time all these years.
That's a testament in itself.
It's very cool.
All right, so your white-collar crime
Yep.
spree ends, and you now start to move more towards TNVC.
Not yet.
Oh.
So my buddy, who now got out of the Navy, is working for Boeing Satellite Systems, which was Hughes Space and Com where I used to work. I wanted to get back in again. I wanted to get my tickets back, my tickets back, and what we call is, get my, clearances back. We call them get our tickets back. And I call him up, and he's like, what are you doing? I told him what I'm doing. He goes, man, why don't you come back in, man? Let's get you back in the system, right? The system, get your tickets, get your clearance back. And I said, okay. So started the paperwork to get to my TSS, SBI, CI, all that stuff. And then 6 months later, I was working for him doing encryption.
Nice.
Yeah, doing real cool stuff, doing crypto work. And that was a lot of fun.
That's
So,
a little bit of a departure.
yeah, it is. I had to learn a lot. It was a big learning curve about diagnosing issues with comm gear and stuff like that. So he took me under his wing, and it was real technical, right?
Yeah.
And I'm Mr. Potato Head and a lot of that stuff, so
Yeah.
I didn't know what the hell I was doing. But he took me in. But the plan was to get me my tickets first and get back in aerospace. But he took me under his wing to get me my tickets back. It was a great job, but the whole goal was to work there for a year or two, get my tickets, and go back and get back in the aerospace community.
Got it.
That was the plan. And it worked out. So a year and a half, 2 years later, I worked there. So 1998, I finally knocked on Lockheed's door. And I said, I
You
wanna
announced
come
your
work.
presence.
I did, and gave him a resume from way back in the Air Force, early 117, all these other classified programs. We would then talk about B-2 bomber, all that. And they did. They opened the door for me, and I went back to my alma mater at Lockheed Skunk Works out in Palmdale, Plant 42 in 1998.
Wow.
And then that's the beginnings of TNVC in 2000, about 3 or 4 years later. A friend of mine who was selling night vision in Northern California, and I started a lot of police officer friends. I mean, that were still doing a lot of work for Southern California police departments. I met a lot of Fed guys back at the time. They were doing surveillance, and one of my buddies came to me and said, hey, we're looking for some night vision scopes, an actual rifle scope. We're looking for a dedicated night vision rifle scope. Do you know anybody in the industry? I'm like, I can make some calls. So I called a friend of mine I met through the way back when through another acquaintance who owned a night vision company called Optics HQ back in the day.
Oh my God, I remember them.
Still there. They're still there to this day. Kobe runs it. Hello, Kobe. Great guy if he's listening.
Wow.
Still runs it. And I said, hey, he needs a night vision scope. And he said, well, call these other guys in Arizona. I forgot their name was. We don't carry that line of scope. And called those guys, and they couldn't get me the scope, but I went back, finally got a night vision scope and delivered to the local police department. And that's how basically it really started for me. The night vision is just as a hobby. I mean, just selling it on the side. And the guy up north that owned the company at the time, Mike, said, hey, Vic, would you like to start selling some scopes on the side to your buddies in the night vision industry? And I mean, the buddies in the law enforcement industry. And I'm like, yeah, okay. So he gave me a couple of night vision scopes. Basically, I sold maybe a couple of Raptors at the beginning, a 6X big old Raptor, you know, heavy like a boat anchor, those things. They were great, though, back in the day. And I sold my first 2 Raptors, I think, in 2003, somewhere in there, 2002, right before that. And that's really how it started. It wasn't like it was pre-planned. It wasn't that I was going to go set this business model up and had this big business plan to go forward. And I just started selling night vision to some police departments that wanted some rifle scopes and things like that. It wasn't nothing special. When I first started, I sold maybe in 6 months, maybe 3 or 4 scopes. Didn't advertise. I didn't do any of that. Yeah, I wasn't there. But what did happen in the 2002 timeframe, I joined AR15.com. Ha! So when it came back, I forgot to talk about the firearms stuff. So let's switch back to 1982. When I first got to Norton, I told you about there and couldn't believe I was in the military. And I bought everything I could, scraped up all my pennies. My first, believe it or not, my first gun ever when I got to Norton was an Ingram MAC-10 civilian version.
No way.
Because I thought that, it was a cool bad guy gun. It was terrible. I mean, it's a sheet metal gun. And I have one now, a machine gun I bought in Nevada. I bought a Ruger. I bought a Ruger, a 1022. I bought the Ingram MAC-10. I bought a bunch of other different guns, and I was fascinated, right? And I kept them all at the armory over there at Norton Air Force Base. We had to keep all your guns. I must have had 10 guns in the first year I got there. Scraped all my pennies together because I had that fascination, right?
Yeah.
So it was great. No formal training. I just bought all those goofy guns, Ingram MAC-10. Who buys that for your first gun?
First of all, it's so funny to hear you say that. We had those in our inventory back in the day.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Those were our kind of like the PDWs of the time. So we had those as a counter ambush for close range.
Is that right?
Yeah, we would use them in our vehicles when we would go up to checkpoints.
Yeah, they're compact.
Oh, they were small.
Yeah.
And yeah, I love telling the story about we would take them out to the range and they're very abusive on themselves. You know, they fire from the open bolt. And they have
sure
a
did.
very,
The
very
original
heavy,
ones did. The original open bolt version. It wasn't closed bolt. Original open bolt. Worth a lot of money, civilian version wise.
Yes, and they have a big buffer that takes the bulk of the beating.
Yeah,
and we would go through those things like they were candy.
Wow.
Yeah, we would shoot the piss out of those things.
Yeah, and I had a 45 caliber version too.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, open bolt 45. Yep.
All of ours were all 9, and we had 10-round magazines and 30-round magazines. And so we would run the 10-round magazines in the gun because we could put those under our jackets, and we could walk around in town and kind of be somewhat discreet about them. And then we would have the 30-rounders for like real intense suppression kind of scenarios. So whenever we would take them to the range, there's not a lot of surface area to grip. So they used to have that little strap.
Yeah.
You used to hold on to the strap, right?
Right.
You just kind of do that. You know, watch any old Chuck Norris movies, and there's a lot of there's Mac 10s in there all day long.
Right.
So we started. What the problem was is that those things were so close to the edge of the gun, the barrel, that and they were kind of like cheap nylon, that we would burn through them.
Wow.
After a while, they would just kind of burn, and then they would break off. We didn't have anything to replace them with, so we ended up having to learn how to shoot those things without the strap, actually just holding on to what little surface area there was. Basically, you had like this modified grip under,
there wasn't much room in front of the magazine.
Not at all. It was
yeah.
so small. Like you just literally had to hold on to this. The wireframe stocks they had, those things were junk. Oh man, what was cool is when we figured out how to actually shoot them one-handed. There was a first kind of like pistol brace, if you will.
Yeah.
Because it had that loop over it that you would just put over your forearm, and you would basically be able to kind of like cant it down and put a little pressure on there, and you could actually shoot it pretty decently with one hand. Not for a 30-round mag, but for a 10-round mag easily.
And they had the old funky sponge suppressors on there as well. Obviously, they didn't have that back in the day, but yeah, I remember they originally came with those foam suppressors. You must have melted through a bunch of those.
We couldn't use them after a while. When you are comparing, it's so funny we're talking about this. When you're comparing suppressors and you have an SD, you really don't have. There's really not anything else to compare them to. Like back then, all of our other screw-on suppressors were just ineffective in that case, and guys would use them. Like I ran a suppressor, I can't remember what make and model it was, but it was a replacement for my flash hider, so I had to screw it on, and it was, basically once it was on, it wasn't coming off. So I had to run with it, and it was long and heavy and all that other. So you did get spoiled with the MP5 SD.
And even the MP5 SD, it's been worked on where the barrel itself has been replaced, and the ports of the barrel actually. I believe the feet per second on the original MP5 SD was only like 8 something because the ports, as you use full charge ammo, it automatically slower the velocity down the supersonic projectile. Well, the port that was done through Ralph, he's out of Arizona. I can't believe his name escapes me. Company, I'll remember it. He does actual different porting where now you get 960 feet per second, right below the speed of sound, so you're getting even more velocity through a supersonic projectile, but not going through the sound, the sound barrier. Yeah. So his work is phenomenal. So he's done all the work on my MP5 SD. I have an MP5K.
Wow.
But the MP5 SD is an amazing gun for what he did with it. A little bit more velocity than the original German HK barrel.
Wow.
He did the reporting of it.
That's so cool.
Great gun. But
that was always my complaint with the SD. I took it on an op one time, and I felt very vulnerable with it, and I did and I was tasked with it. That was my weapon. I didn't have a choice. It was like, this is what you're taking. You're this guy. You're going to be doing this job.
Yeah, and you sure wasn't defeating armor with it.
Not at all.
Yeah.
Not even close.
Yeah.
So I remember I had to come back and, again, there was just something I was not happy with. So I set up a demo where I had the old style pepper poppers, and back in the day, you could set the pepper popper to fall based on like number of hits. So like you can crank it down so it takes like 3 or 4 repeated hits or 1 hit, whatever your choice. And I set it to 1 hit from a 226. And then I had the 226. I had 4 poppers out there. 226 was on one, MP5 standard with no suppressor was on another, MP5 with the tri-lock suppressor that went on there, and then the MP5 SD. And the point was to show kind of like visually what we're seeing when we shoot things with the SD, in our field, which is it's not as effective as we once had hoped compared to some of the other stuff. So like it would take me 3 shots to put down a pepper popper with an SD, whereas it would only take me 1 shot with the 226.
Sure.
And it's like that's junkyard science, no doubt about it.
Yep.
Junkyard science. But it proved my point was like, hey, listen, I'd much rather have the MP5 just with this, because we also didn't have a lot of those suppressors, the tri-lock suppressors that went on there. We didn't have a lot of them. We only had like maybe, I don't know, 2 or 3 per platoon at that time. So luckily the demonstration dog and pony there was enough to try to fast track more being deployed to the teams as far as like as an other option for a suppressor. Because the other thing, we had the Hush Puppy, which is the integrated 22, which is a great gun, but it's a 22.
Yeah,
and so it's a very and I keep telling everybody,
specific
I'm like,
purpose
listen,
gun,
that SD is going to work. I just have to get really close to the guy, which I'm not crazy about.
Yeah,
I'd much rather be
for obvious reasons.
I'd much rather kind of get a little bit more standoff.
Yeah.
So that was the whole point behind my demonstration.
Yep.
All right, so you have a Mac 10, an Ingram Mac 10, a legitimate one.
Yeah, Ruger 1022s. A bunch of other stuff that I bought. I was all in. I was researching all the guns. Hadn't started reloading yet. I did that a little later.
Oh,
but
interesting.
I did all the reloading. I was hand loading, and then I got involved with precision shooting, long range. I went to Clint Smith's Thunder Ranch in 1994.
Oh, wow.
I just saw Clint just here at Pro Gun Club in Nevada just last year. I haven't seen him in years. I still got my graduation picture. And I remember in the graduation, the owner of Front Sight, at that time, Front Sight wasn't even developed yet. He was looking for investors back in the day in 1994. So I made some great acquaintances. Rob Anderson from AWC Systems Technology. Lynn McWilliams was running the company at the time. He made the first amphibian, the Integral Suppressed Mark IV 22 handgun. I own 3 of them now. When I came to Nevada, I bought all 3 of them, all 3 colors I got. The AWC Mark IV integrally suppressed. I have all 3 colors, so I have a whole entourage of suppressors. And then when I got to Nevada, all of my Surefire buddies, right? Chris Cahill, thanks, man. He set me up with all the suppressors at amazing cost.
Yeah.
I got suppressors and cans on every gun in my inventory, every gun nowadays.
I love it.
So, but yeah, young guy. Like I said, I'm always intrigued by the MP5 SD with the British SAS guys, and I was got hooked on firearms because I never could have them as a kid, and I always wanted one and never could get it. And all I spent my money on in the Air Force was guns. I didn't drink; it was just guns, firearms.
It's so funny to hear you say that, because I feel like I had a very similar kind of upbringing. My parents weren't anti-gun. They had very similar kind of beliefs in the sense we just don't know enough. We would go hunting, and we would go out with friends to the range, but we just didn't have any in our house. So I remember I came back from leave. Post Buds, I think it was. No, it wasn't, because I had this gun at Buds. I came back from leave from, I think, maybe A school, and I went to a gun show with my dad, and I bought my first gun there, and it was a Ruger P85.
Nice.
Yeah, I mean, it was like I didn't know any different. I was just like, it looked cool.
Yep.
I remember that. It was like, knowing now what I know, it was like not necessarily the best gun.
Yeah.
But this was like, again, like late 80s.
Yeah, and same thing. My first handgun, one of the worst HK handguns I think they ever made was an HK VP70.
Oh my goodness!
With a trigger pull of about 24 pounds on that damn thing. Single, double action every time you pull the trigger. Space age polymer. I was into that stuff.
Yes, I can see that. I can see the space age.
Yeah. HK VP70 was my first handgun, and that thing, I don't have it anymore. But man, that trigger pull on that thing was just atrocious.
Oh God. Well, let me ask you this. So, like, what at this point, up until this point, what's been like the most challenging thing that you've had to overcome or deal with? Was it the uncertainty of being laid off during that time period?
During that time period, it was tough, because even now that I'm back at Lockheed again at Skunk Works, having a great time. I was an IPT lead for the JSF Joint Strike Fighter Radome program.
Nice.
I also worked at the Helendale Measurement Facility. We shot radar at different vehicles and stuff like that. That was fun, and did a lot of TDY and traveling. So, but yeah, I was worried. What was going to happen when the JSF went full rate production, because we have rifts all the time. I was working on other programs. I was having a time of my life, and the classified, building things 50 years in the future, and that's what Skunk Works does. Cool stuff. So being in the know at the time was a very cool job, right?
Outstanding.
Knowing that no adversary will rule the world skies like us.
Yeah, I know.
Nobody can compete.
Yeah.
Some people think that could be deficient if the shooting war starts. No, ma'am and sir, we are quite good. We are good.
I love hearing that, man.
We are good.
I love hearing that.
People who rule the world rule the skies.
100%.
By far.
Back in the day, it was the seas, but now it's the skies.
It is
when
the
we
skies.
have the skies.
Orbit and atmosphere. Our vehicle and orbit breathing, we rule.
I love it.
We are phenomenal about what we do. So
I love hearing that.
that's what I can say.
And that's good enough for me. I'll take that because what I know and what I see or what I've seen, it's funny too because I would always tell guys, man, there is nothing like having air support. You feel like you're invincible. You go out there, you push out. It's like the little brother that's gonna go pick a fight.
Yeah.
Because
back is right here.
Yeah, exactly. You're just gonna get on the horn. You're gonna call in a fast mover, call inspector, call in some sort of gunship, and everything's gonna be good. Not always, but you had that. So
to answer complete your question, things were going really well at Lockheed.
Yeah.
I was having a time of my life. I didn't like to driving 78 miles one way each day to Palmdale. I was living in Inland Empire, Southern California. I drove 78 miles one way.
Oh,
so
my
you do
God.
the math. I'm doing 156 miles round trip every day to Palmdale.
Oh, my God.
I didn't want to live in Palmdale. And,
I can't say I blame
my
you.
wife was in the Inland Empire at the time, and I didn't want to.
One way.
Yeah, one way, 78, 156 round trip. That's how much I love my job. I did. It was a great job.
Good for that. Yeah, because you've got to love.
terrible. Yeah,
you've got to love your job to do a commute like that.
Yeah,
for
driving on a
how long?
138 Delta High. Well, for a little over 5.5 years. So, and it was the first time. So the night vision stuff. So I'm selling night vision still on the side.
Yeah.
That's growing, like it or not. More and more people locally are wanting night vision.
Interesting.
So I'm just selling more and more rifle scopes, and it got to a point where the person that I was buying my night vision from said, hey, Mike and Optics HQ said, hey, I have this new IR illuminator, which people know all the time is called the Torch.
Yeah.
Being from Chicago, the Bears, it was called the Torch.
The Torch.
And it was an early IR illuminator. Not afraid to admit it was made in Russia at the time, but it was made for him. And he said, hey, what do you think about your guys selling an IR illuminator to go with their night vision rifle scopes? Because a lot of guys at that time were buying a lot of IR laser illuminators. They were very, very restricted, and you couldn't even get those for LE back then. Yeah. Now things have changed, obviously. So even buying the IR laser illuminators at the time were very taboo unless you really knew somebody. They were very restricted even for law enforcement back then, just U.S. military only and allies. So we came out with this IR illuminator, and it's really started to take off. People got a hold of this illuminator. They started talking about it really online. This is like 2001, somewhere in there. And then I joined ARFCOM in 2002. And I was really all in with night vision. I loved every part of it. It was a hobby. It was my passion. I loved doing it. I would go out shooting at night with it. It was the coolest thing in the world.
It is. It's a lot of fun.
It's a force multiplier like you never could have. And even back in the day, early Gen 3, it still was phenomenal.
Yeah.
So I would take pictures all the time and post things on the ARFCOM early on about night vision. And it was really funny back then, Jeff, because no one was talking about night vision online.
Yeah.
You had the 4 or 5 major companies that were out there. You had NVEC, Night Vision Equipment Company, which is a night vision device. And I'm not afraid to talk about my competitors even to this day. They're all great companies. It was Night Vision Devices. It was Morrow Vision. It was U.S. Night Vision. Night Vision Depot, which is the owner's son, Bill Group Jr. His dad owned Night Vision Equipment Company, a great company. Yeah. So you really had those 4 major companies. There really wasn't, and none of those companies really were online talking about it.
Interesting.
Everybody kind of knew they were there, and nobody was like taboo. Yeah. No one talked night vision back in the day. It was very limited.
It was.
So it was, once again, I think, divine intervention, the good Lord looking over me and just showed me the way. I've just started doing more and more. And then I met Ed Aviles Sr., right? Ed Sr. Yeah. And long before I met Juan and, God rest in peace, Ed, right? Yeah. So I met his dad, and I said, hey, why don't we get a night vision forum going on AR15.com? Because to me, I was into guns. That's what brought me to the ARFCOM. Yeah. Not night vision, but firearms, right? Yeah. I was all in to talk about firearms. Heck with the night vision. I want to talk firearms. And then I just started showing some pictures at night, and people were like, oh, my gosh, what is this stuff? And then I asked Ed and Eric, this other mod named Eric E., I believe his name was, and we did a night vision. To this day, it's on the ARFCOM Night Vision FAQ, frequent asked questions, is still on that forum, which we started in 2002. and or 2003, and they said, yeah, let's do an FAQ. They weren't sure if they're going to do a full-fledged forum.
For sure.
And then about a year went by, and we had hundreds of thousands of reads, approaching like 1 million in just a year of just in the night vision section. People just loved it.
Yeah.
And then we finally got enough traffic, and they said, yeah, we think we can do your own forum. And I became a moderator early on. People realized I was a moderator of the ARFCOM Night Vision Forum way back when.
Oh, man.
And it was great. We had a great crew of guys, and everybody started using night vision exchange in stories because no one was talking about it.
Yeah.
It was really taboo. I don't know why. And then it came to that point where I had the torch, and I wasn't selling anything online. It got to a point where people were asking where you got this IR illuminator. I'm like, well, I sell them. And
so imagine that.
So it worked out where at the time I asked permission if I could become a dealer there. And I became a very, very small dealer back in 2003, something like that. I think it was 2003. I became selling just a torch, nothing else, that little IR illuminator, no scopes, nothing, just a little IR illuminator. And I sold a lot of them. Wow. So it started growing from there.
Yeah.
But I'm still working full-time at Lockheed.
Oh,
no
wow.
one, I really didn't talk about Lockheed. No one knew I was working at Lockheed at Skunk Works. And
I didn't realize that you were still there at the beginning. Of TNVC.
So when I called you, I was still at Lockheed.
Oh, my God.
Very first, and that's coming up when I first contacted you. So 2004, it's really growing now.
Yeah.
I'm selling more torches. I'm selling more rifle scopes.
Yeah.
And it gets to a point where on my lunch hour at Lockheed, literally my lunch hour, I'm calling customers back.
Oh, my God.
At night, I'm packing everything up from the orders that came in, from just phone call orders. I just started a little website. It was tacticalnightvision.com, not TNVC. I still own the domain. It wasn't TNVC.com. And I just started putting little products. I would take pictures in my backyard of a Raptor sitting on top of a 6.8 SPC when they first came out. Wes at MSTN built my first 6.8.
Oh my God, I remember Wes.
Yeah. So he built my first 6.8, and I stuck a Raptor on there with an ARMS bi-level mount. The big old honking bi-level mount from ARMS back in those days with the Lou and Dick Swan stories, right?
Yeah.
We can talk forever on those stories.
Oh my God. Yeah.
So it started really taking off, not knowing it, and it got to a point where my wife was a school teacher, and during her lunch hour, she would take all the packages to the UPS local store to mail all my orders out. Oh my God. But I still didn't have any phone lines, and I had my cell phone. I'd call customers back, at the beginning of my lunch hour. So it got to a point, and my inspiration at that time, it got so busy, I was introduced to Rich, the owner of Magpul. Back in the day. I don't even know if Rich remembers me. He may. I know Drake, obviously. I love Drake. He knows me real well. Yeah. I started, for some odd reason, I got a hold of Rich because they came out with the precision rifle stock, the PRS.
Yes.
The first cheek risen kind of AR stock for precision rifles for ARs. Because gas guns, semi-auto ARs, the only accurate gas gun back in the day was H-Case PSG-1, right? Yep. Nobody was really making accurate gas guns back in those days.
Not at all.
So, got introduced to Rich at Magpul. He still just came working out of his basement or whatever. It was way back when. And Rich knew I was doing a lot of work with the Raptors, which, very high cheek weld, night vision scope. Your cheeks got it way up there, and your stock was perfect. Yeah. So I started selling a bunch of those. Got to talk to Rich, and, bless his heart, he invited me for my first SHOT Show, like in 2004, I think it was, still Lockheed. I think it was 2004 or 2005. He invited me to be in his booth, very small booth. It wasn't very big yet.
Yeah.
I first met Drake. Drake was pro staff there. He wasn't even a full-time employee there. He was still a cop in Colorado, I believe. Yeah. So he invited me in his booth, and I'm working in a Magpul booth, showing off my Raptor on, one of my 6.8 SPCs with that PRS stock. And bless his heart, I got a lot of recognition, working in a Magpul booth, and Rich let me work in his booth, and he gave me a lot of advice. And I remember Rich told me, I said, Rich, what am I going to do? I'm growing here. And I remember a month before I made the decision to pop smoke at Lockheed and go out on my own at TNVC, he says, you got to make a decision. Either TNVC, Tactical Night Vision, stays status quo. It just stays. It doesn't grow anymore. And you balance it with Lockheed, or you leave Lockheed, or you throw TNVC and you grow the business. You're either going to be status quo, or you're going to stay with both companies.
Yeah.
So
How did you come up with your decision?
It was tough because, I at the time I was wishing Lockheed was getting close to laying me off or something.
Well, that was the thing.
Yeah, I was hoping it, but it wasn't the case. It wasn't the case at all. The business was booming, right?
So
in the aerospace
you really had to
community.
make a hard choice.
I did, and I decided that I was going to leave Lockheed. I remember my wife. I'm driving my little Toyota Paseo right on the way home, and I remember when I was making decisions, she goes, "Honey, are we sure you're making the right decision?" Right? She's a school teacher, right?
Yeah.
And when you have a full-time check every week, a full-time job, a guaranteed paycheck, versus owning your own business, and
Totally different.
if you don't get any sales one week, you don't get a paycheck, right?
Yeah.
So it was scary. It was very scary.
Without a doubt.
Yeah, but I knew we didn't have any bills. We're real good with our money, and we didn't, overspend or anything. We didn't have credit card bills. We weren't in debt on anything for a house payment and a car payment, so we were okay. We could have just lived on her salary, but, I'm a typical man. My wife's not going to bring in all the money here. I'm going to make a go of this. So I decided that I got a taste of the freedom of owning your own company, what that means, right? I can make my own decisions. I don't have to answer really to anybody except my wife, the Minister of Finance, right?
The Minister of Finance. I love that. That's awesome.
Right. So I made the decision. My director and at Lockheed knew. He acted like he was mad when I turned my, the resignation in and all that stuff, and called me and, "What are you doing?" And the VP called me in, and they knew night vision was doing really well for me. And it was a really, really tough decision for me. After that wasn't divine intervention there like the Air Force. This was, I had to do some thinking on this because this was very, very critical. It was pivotal. It was a life-changing moment, right? It's my whole livelihood. If I'm going to do this or not, this better work, right? We could always go back to Lockheed. So here we are, and I think I made the right decision. So in 2005, I had left Lockheed and gave a tactical night vision company, wasn't TNVC yet on a domain, to give it a whirl. And here we are. In 2003 I started. 2005 I left Lockheed, became a C corp at that time, changed from an S corp to a C corp, and found an accountant, and I got my first guy to help me in shipping in my house. This is still out of my house still. Wow. No headquarters, no nothing. He packed my stuff in my dining room. I had a shipping department was my dining room in my house.
I love it.
That's what it was. And until I got my building a few years later, it was all started from my house. It was truly an American dream of working the homegrown out of your home. But it was Rich from Magpul, and if he listens to this, Rich, thank you very much. He has been such an inspiration. And then getting to you, I knew in TNVC, one thing I've always been good about is education. And people always ask, what makes TNVC, so popular, so good at what we do? It's education. Yeah. It always has been education. I had to learn. If I wanted to learn about real night vision in a tactical arena and live up to my name, a tactical night vision company, I had to learn how to employ those night vision scopes, pocket scopes, and even though I did some surveillance, it was nothing on the level that you folks were doing and the level of strapping on nods at night and doing things. So I remember it was 2005. I wanted to start getting some training, and I called you. Yeah. And you were the only guy in 2005, somewhere in there, the only guy on the planet, at least civilian, that were doing night vision training. You were it. Yeah. You were it. I don't think John Chappie was doing it then, but I think it was it, and I called you.
It was funny because,
still Trident back then, I think. Yeah,
we haven't changed. But the funny thing about it was, we were doing night vision training. We were doing it for the military, which was odd because,
to this day, nobody really does a lot of training for the military and nods.
So we were doing it in
formal training in military circles, always outside contractors doing it.
A lot of times. Yeah. In this case, that's what we were doing. And not a lot of people know that. We didn't really make that well known, but what's ironic is that it got out, that we were the only ones that were actually doing, sophisticated for the time training and education on night vision and how the actual application of it, where it really where the rubber meets the road. Yeah. And I remember it was a hard thing for me because we had done such a good job of establishing ourselves as the the firearms side of the house. Moving into technology was not something that I wanted to. I was worried, okay, do I want to go down this road? Because I'm not sure. There's not, it was extremely limited in its scope because at the time,
very niche,
very, very, at that time period, the only way that you could get any type of night vision is if you went to DRMO. If you figured out how to do that. That was like, I feel like that's what kind of like was the straw that broke the camel's back as far as like the keeping it under wraps. Because they were, for folks that don't know what DRMO is, basically it's an organization within the military that takes a lot of older units, and in a way to recoup investment money, they sell them.
Yeah.
And I mean, we're talking about everything from helicopters to magazines and everything in between.
Yep.
It's crazy what I've...
Anvis goggles, all the old stuff. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yep.
So that was the only way that you could get it. And we had to work really hard. There was a few police departments that at that time were smart enough to figure out, they started getting body armor. They started getting... Actually, I think what started the DRMO was getting fully automatic guns. They were able to get fully automatic ARs, lowers, and then they would just throw their own uppers on there and make them, like machine guns, if you will. So
very cost effective for
it
sure.
is
extremely.
And back in the day, it was the only way for a department to get a fully automatic machine gun. And then that opened the door to, I think, we started seeing night vision at that. Body armor was another thing. They were getting body armor because you would see body armor go out. And then so night vision came out. And when I started doing night vision training in the private sector, it was, in other words, it wasn't military. It started to be law enforcement.
Yep.
It was a very interesting time to do that, because there was, outside of, what you could get from DRMO, if you couldn't get anything from DRMO, what you're using a lot of stuff that's not designed for tactical applications.
No.
It was designed for, and I say this with respect, but it was more for the hunting, lower budget kind of hunting scenarios. And we saw a lot of that in the beginning.
Yeah.
So when I took that call, I was like, okay, because it was interesting. The one thing that struck me with that conversation, because I could recall that conversation, was your desire to know more about the education side of the house.
Exactly.
Right. And to me, where that really was, and I use mature in the sense of mature for the future vision thinking that you had, was nobody else was doing that. Nobody else. You have 4 other companies at the time that offered, but nobody was offering any education to go with it. So folks were left to just kind of like figure that shit out on their own.
Yeah.
And that was not, I mean, when you're spending a couple $1,000s per unit, that's not an easy thing to try to do. So you brought education into the mainstream for night vision.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is you made it so that people now understood what night vision was, but more importantly, what it can do. Right. And that was another huge thing for people.
Force multiplier. It's just
it really is. I
amazing.
mean, when, we've always known that in the military. I mean, that was something that we
really did own the night back in the day.
And
versus now, we own the night back in the day.
It was so much fun. Yeah. I mean, so much fun. Working at night was a privilege in a sense, because number one, we had the technology to allow us to take advantage of the easy things. People are sleeping at night. People are less alert at night. There's less people out at night. So many things that just make it easy for us to do our job, to get close to a target, to take out a few sentries.
That you'd never be able to get close during the daylight hours,
absolutely
right?
Not.
Being a vampire at night is good.
Yeah. So it was funny because, like, I remember we did this, like, we were doing mount operations, and it was like daytime stuff. So we were working. It was part of our workup. And this Army unit came into our mount facility and got all of us together, and we're like, hey, we need some OPFOR for our unit. We're doing this, kind of like FOB kind of thing. And, we just, we need something. We're like, well, we're not interested in doing anything during the day. That's just stupid. I mean, you got your machine gun, you got all your interlacing fields of fire, you got your mortars. Well, that's not fun.
Yeah.
How's that fun for us?
Yeah.
It's like, well, we won't limit it to daytime. If you wanted to do nighttime, we would be happy to do that. We're like, okay, nighttime? Deal. And it was so much fun because we literally are just like walking in the Virginia woods, like 1 foot every like 10 seconds. But under nods, it was so easy. You just take a step, pause, take a step, pause. And before you know, we're inside the perimeter. I have no idea we're there.
Yeah.
We're going all this, we laid these little... Back then, remember the dome chem lights?
Yeah, sure.
So those were bombs basically. We laid them all over the all over the camp, all over. I mean, we hit up like the communications tent, we hit up the command staff tent, we hit up I think it was, what was the third tent? We hit 3 tents, and then after that, we're like, okay, this is too easy. We just started putting them on everything, slapping them under things. Like, we put them underneath vehicles, so in the daytime when they woke up, they wouldn't be able to see them because we had to do a debrief the next day, and they were like, oh, that's bullshit. You guys didn't do that. You guys didn't do that. Let's go over to this vehicle. So we started walking over the vehicles, and I was worried that maybe they didn't stick, And as soon as we started walking over there, I climbed underneath the vehicle, and I'm like, "Yep, still here." Staff sergeant climbs under there with me. He's like, "Holy shit!"
Yeah, right.
And then they started walking and started looking at all the other vehicles and all the tents that we had basically got in. They're like, "How did you do that?
Clue.
How did you do that?" We were like, "Well, that's just what we do."
Yeah,
we didn't tell them we were using night vision. We didn't tell them that we were, kind of basically all night long.
Great story of the force multiplier.
It was. I mean, that's how we could. I mean, they had perimeter security. They had they had dug foxholes. They even had tripwires and shit like that we could see with the night vision because we were moving so slow. We could see how they were set up, and it was obvious in some of the areas where they were setting them up. So that is what night vision provided you. And that's something that people didn't realize. People didn't understand that. There's when you first started with the night vision, I would imagine that somebody that was asking for a scope was looking for a scope to use on a, like a precision rifle. And that's awesome to be able to bring that field capability to yourself.
Yeah.
But, and we saw that also with our snipers. They kind of started, and then before you knew it, the assaulters were relying heavily on it. And before you know it, everybody was integrated. Because when we would do the assaults, we would sneak and peek. We'd move up there under nods. And then as soon as we would breach, we'd go white light back in the day.
Yep.
And partly because, we were running monoculars back then, which were great for getting up to the target. But once you're inside the building, not so good. So we just said, fuck it, we're going white light.
Yeah.
So as we advanced technology to be able to just continue to move through the building in complete darkness and everything be completely,
stay dark.
outside of the human eye, being able to stay outside of the human eye capability was awesome.
Yeah, and I remember also when we talked, it was getting on an education platform. You brought up a key that still today is my Bible. It's education. Excuse me. You said to me, first off, you had a hard time finding people who were tactically sound during the day.
Yeah.
There wasn't a lot of firearm tactical schools back then.
Yeah.
Now they're everywhere, right?
So true.
Which is great. I mean,
you
have former special operations guys giving tactical training. We'll talk more about the people that I employ in my training division are amazing. Yeah. And you said, I would really like to see me personally have a lot more tactical rifle training before we even think about getting you out and doing night vision.
So true.
Which is very true. And I didn't know at the time. I think, how hard can it be? And I won't mention the name who said this years ago. How hard can it be? Throw some batteries in and go run your night vision.
Yeah.
We've had salesmen tell me this over the years, pat me on the head, right, trying to let me buy something.
Oh, my God.
We won't mention names, but it's just funny over the years you hear stories like that. How hard can it be? You throw the battery in and run.
Yes.
It's more than that,
it's
as we know.
It's completely different.
And I remember you telling me like it was yesterday in 2005, way back when, we were 17 years ago, and you said, I'd like to see you, and it didn't hurt my ego. You told me flat out you wanted to see me have more tactical training with an AR because you asked me what my training was.
Yeah.
And I hardly had any at all in the AR market, right? In the tactical arena where you're shooting ARs. And I said, okay, little deflated, right? But good. No, it was you. I mean, it was the truth. It was. And it woke me up. That's why I said you've always been an inspiration, Jeff. You may not know this, but when you told me that, I remember like it was yesterday, you said, you need to go get some more training before I can think about bringing you under nods. Because you had a hard enough time back in the day finding people who were proficient enough with their firearms because that multiplies by a factor of 100 and you're doing things in the dark.
Oh, my God.
Chamber checks and doing whatever, malfunction drills and all at night. I mean, it's a total different scenario at night when the lights are on. The shade goes over your eyes. So I took that to heart, and I did. And at that time, I decided that I need to go get trained up in firearms.
Nice.
And I went, and at the time, I saw guys, old tactical trainers, Magpul Dynamics at the time was doing it. Travis Haley.
Yeah.
And, back in the day, I met him. I met him at SHOT Show my very first time I ever ran at SHOT Show, which was by accident. Another great story. I was doing Cat Precision Coatings. I met because I wanted some firearms painted, and he was doing a holographic paint coat. And it was Cat Precision Coatings who did a holographic paint coat. And I met him, and I went to SHOT Show because he couldn't make the show, and he wanted me to go do it because I had painted my AR with his color. So I met Travis Haley for the first time. It was Simply Dynamic or something like that. I think it was his company name. And Travis still today is a great friend of mine.
I love Travis.
Yeah, Travis is awesome. And so he gave me some great training for a while. He took me under his wing and did a lot of tactical training with me early on. And I just started evolving my tactical training under, doing that first, getting that baseline, right? That's all I did. I did nothing except train for 2 years straight. No night vision, just strictly tactical training with an AR and handgun. You do the transitions and just doing drills after drills after drills and practicing working. And by this time, I was full-time at TNVC. Night vision forum was going strong at RFCOM. I started selling more and more, taking pictures in my backyard. Still not offering any training, but I wasn't thinking about offering training myself.
Right.
But when I talked to you back in the day, I needed to know that people didn't think I was full of crap. That I could talk the talk, but I could always walk the walk because I also had training and I knew what it meant. Because I didn't want to be a salesman. To this day, TNVC is not about sales. It never has been. It's never been about the almighty profit dollar, Jeff. It's all been about education. And I always thought at the beginning, talking to customers on the phone, I always thought they were thinking I was being nosy.
Right.
Like, why is this guy asking me all these questions about what I'm going to use it for? And I was always cognizant of that, but I wanted to know to understand how to help the customer.
Absolutely.
Well, that secret sauce recipe is still alive and well in 2022. Nothing's changed. We still ask all the customers, what are you using this for? What are you going to do?
It's so important.
Yeah, it is. But I knew that's where I wanted to be. I needed to be that company early on. Not because it might have sold better. It's just when my roommate was killed, going back to that in 1992, February 21st, 1992, substandard policies, substandard SOP, not running two-man units in the highest murder capital per city in the whole country. There's reasons, and those come to haunt you one day, right? You only get away with that so far. And I knew when I started this company, lives are going to be at stake. I knew I was going to be talking to law enforcement officers. I knew I was going to be talking to soldiers. I knew I was going to be talking to federal agencies. And what company was I going to be if I said, hey, just stuck a battery in it? How hard can that be? That was a no-go for me.
I'm so glad to hear that. And I think what you have done is you actually reshaped the industry in doing so. Because, I would get a lot of pushback when we would get requested to go and do that class. Because the class is not easy. It's we have to do a full day of training to get everybody up to speed so we can see what we have to work with.
You're
exactly.
Sure.
And then we don't get into the nighttime stuff. And then when we get into nighttime stuff, it's canned. It's linear progression in a sense. We kind of work them slowly. And people are always, in this industry, it's kind of funny. I see the industry from two different ways. I see the industry from people that just kind of come from the bottom up, and then people come from the top down. And what I mean by that is, people that come from the bottom up don't see the big picture, right? People come from the top down. They have already been in the big picture. They know what that looks like. So I know that ultimately, if I'm dealing with a law enforcement or a military unit, that they're going to try to be working at night under nods during doing assaults, doing some sort of tactical operation that is an orchestra at best and chaos at worst. And so when you add night vision, what people don't understand about night vision, what it does is that, I used to joke about this, but it's partially true. It makes you half as dumb. Or half as smart, however you want to look at it. You're half as smart on the firing line as you are during daytime, because there's for many people that are not accustomed to working under nods, that kind of first time being under nods at night, the restriction that you're dealt,
that 40-degree circle, right?
That restriction of what you have to deal with makes it really tough.
Sure
Your
does.
world went from 190 down to that 40. And it's a hard transition for so many people to make. Just walking.
It is.
Just walking.
That's why you said, when you mentioned earlier about doing everything slow and meticulous. It's so true. Even our training to this day, what we do, everything is slow and meticulous. Nothing is fast. Fast definitely means slow in a world of night vision at night.
I love hearing that, because when you get to that point where I assume that's where you're ultimately leading to. Like you're not you, but the law enforcement military units when they would contact me, I assume that you're ultimately going to want to be using this for night vision or this night vision for assaults.
Yeah.
And so there's a pathway to get there, and there's no other way. There's no shortcut or secret kind of path. You just got to do the work, which means like we would tell them like, hey, so when we set our training date, whatever that is, my recommendation is that each of the officers has at least 20 plus hours under nods before we start working with them. 20 plus hours under nods.
It's nothing.
It's not. but that just means that they understand how to put them on
the surface.
They know how to put them on.
Tilting our mount.
Exactly. They know the minimum stuff that they need so that we're not teaching a basic class, so we can actually do what they're expecting us to do.
Yeah.
And so people are like, 20 hours. That seems like it's a lot. I'm like, well, technically it can be a lot depending on how you span it out. But if, we usually would tell people like, do 4-hour blocks. 4-hour blocks is good. So that's like, 4 to 6 4-hour blocks. You're good.
Yep.
You'll have enough, because what you're learning during that time period is you're learning how to actually use the damn things, how to work them, how to wear them.
And 90% is all feel.
Yeah.
It's all feel. I can't look at my AR and I can't look for malfunctions. I'm not doing it. It is all feel, from the tilt on your mount to the power button on your thing. And it's a perishable skill.
It's so true.
How many times have I haven't had a Wilcox G24 and it's been a while and it's just that half second more? I'm like, man, am I slow, right?
Yes.
It's just like, damn, I suck.
So the funny thing about the funny thing about that too is like when I try to tell people that, yeah, this is not going to be easy, they're like, how hard can it be?
There you go. Throw a battery and go.
Yeah, how hard can it be? And I'm like, well,
when you put
I'll tell you what,
you'll know.
Yeah, exactly. That's why we would ask. And I never, I would never turn down somebody who didn't get a full 20 hours, but by asking for 20 meant that I might get 4 to 8.
Yes.
In real life.
Sure.
Which was enough at least for them to know where the on switch was, how to mount it. And the thing I always wanted them to get comfortable with is how uncomfortable it is wearing nods. The wear and tear. Now back then, that was old school.
Yeah.
These days we have advanced so much. Wearing them for extended hours is much more
amazing.
Oh my God.
From the helmet suspension systems to the 4D tactical pads we offer. It's just not a sales plug, but you can find aftermarket pads. Your helmet you can wear for hours without causing headaches, and the collimation of dual goggles they never really had years ago of aligning the alignment of the eyes with your tubes with your eyes is just amazing nowadays.
It
so really, satisfying and relaxing versus how it used to be.
It is literally almost like night and day.
Yeah,
it is almost like night and day.
Agreed.
Back in the day.
Yeah.
All right. So TNVC, you start pursuing the grounding of your company in education.
It is. I knew once again, not because it was selling any more night vision. That, believe me, folks probably think, it was just you came up with this big sales plan to sell more night vision. Jeff, and to all the people listening, it wasn't that way for me.
Yeah.
I had to save lives.
Yeah.
It might sound, some people think it's a cliche, but nope. I had my best friend and roommate who got killed. I knew what substandard policies and procedures were. That wasn't going to happen under my watch anymore. And I was going to do the best I can for the law enforcement to save lives. And take that extra step and take the time, whoever it was, and even for the home defense folk who called me and said, hey, I'm looking for some night vision to protect my family. Yeah. But I had to have a baseline. It wasn't just putting a battery in and how hard can it be. I had to understand the technology.
Yeah.
I had to understand the gear.
So
had to understand the training. Even though I wasn't training using it, was coming, but at least I had to understand the technology and the limitations of what we needed to do to get to the path you needed to go to.
So important. Like, I think one of the things that people have a misconception about is what they can do, right? And so when you are working with them for that many, so there are things they can't do, right? But when you work with them for so long, those limitations actually start to kind of like, they might start off as rough edges.
Sure.
But as you use them more, those limitations, those edges kind of get rounded, softened a little bit, and they become less of a limitation and more of just like an obstacle.
And more can identify those obstacles. That's the other thing. Yeah,
that's huge.
I can understand the limits of that technology, what I really can and can't use it for when I'm overstepping that limitation.
So speaking of technology and how fast it, in particular in the night vision world, it has evolved at such a rapid growth rate.
It has.
And one of the benefits to that is that it has made it more affordable for not just
It
law
has.
enforcement,
It has.
but for everybody in
For general consumers, yeah.
it's general-
U.S. citizens, yeah. It's come
Absolutely.
down, yeah.
So
Typical PVS 14 when I first started was $4,200.
Yeah.
Now you can typical Gen 3 with a lower grade tube, it just works just fantastic. Is an XLSH tube from Excelis. You can find a PVS 14 sometimes $2,500, $2,700.
Yeah, it's like half the price nowadays.
Yeah.
And I know that's still steep in many cases.
It is.
But so this is what I always tell people. I'm like, listen, you're not going to get in this game without there being a real need. And like if there is a real need, like you live out in the country and you've got vermin, you got coyotes, you've got pigs, you've got something like that. You're losing livestock, you're seeing damage and all that other stuff. Then it is a no-brainer that maybe let's just say tooth to tail, including the mounts and getting everything ready to go. You're looking at maybe $3,000.
Good figure for that.
It's a steep price to pay at first, but if you defined it as a true need, the moment you're out there actually using it, that price, that entry point that you paid, you don't even. It's a blip on the radar behind you.
It is.
It's such a small thing, and that's because you become familiar with the advantages that it brings you that are hard to quantify, especially hard to put a price on.
Yeah, you bet.
It really is hard for folks to see that. I mean, you're mentioning of saving lives. Yeah, being able to see somebody that is obscured by a shadow, that is obscured by depth that I can't see, but I can see under nods is like, man, it's huge. It's like cheating.
Yeah, it is.
I can remember literally like being, 20 yards away from people and them having no idea we're there. And I'm like the lead element of an entire assault force, and they have no idea we're there at all. And it just was like, I'm like, sometimes I would think to myself, I'm like, man, this is just so cool. This is just so.
It is.
You have that
just
split
the force
second
multiplier that makes you feel superhuman. It
yeah,
does. Like,
it does.
He can't see me.
He can't see me.
In those days you're talking about, we were the own the night. Not
That's
our
true.
adversaries didn't have this stuff.
It's
they
true.
didn't.
It's tough now. I mean, we can talk. Well, that's a whole other show to talk about that. So now that you have entered the market and you have established the
beginning branding of TNVC,
yes,
yeah.
But really the part of that branding was as a educational entity. That I think is one of the I guess you could say feathers in your cap that separates you from the other competitors. And it's great. I think competition is awesome. I think it does.
So do I.
It helps us to improve.
It's an American. It's
the
truly
American dream.
Yes,
It's the American dream.
Yes, it is.
And in your case, you weren't necessarily competing. You had discovered.
No, those other 4 or 5 companies were way above DiCosola and TNVC. We were just minions back in the day.
Yeah. But what you discovered was a path to get to that level through the education that they weren't doing. In other words, you saw a market availability that they couldn't see. And you saw it because it was personal to you.
It was very personal.
It was important to you.
Very personal.
Which I believe is one of the other reasons why it's been so successful. Is because it was so important to you, because it was so personal.
Yeah, it's to this day. You could probably hear the emotion in my voice. To this day, we'll get to our training division, who you met, my training director, and what we do, how it's expanded. But that was my whole goal. We had to educate, and education was first and foremost. This is why we do a 3-hour briefing the day one of TNVC Night Fighter training. Yeah. It might be boring to some, but it's a 3-hour slide presentation, 2-3 hour. We just go over technology. We lay the baseline and the groundwork down. And
it's important.
It is, and it is. It's always been my passion to this day. It's education. I still don't. The folks that hire within TNVC, we'll talk more about my amazing employees. I'm humbled every day what I have, Jeff. They're the best of the best. They truly are the best in the world at what they do. And I say that with all due heartedness. They are phenomenal. But they all know it's our education. I don't care, and I'll say it, look you straight in the eye and say, I wouldn't care if I sold anything tomorrow if my education had to suffer. It's never been the almighty profit dollars to me. It's never been about that. It's been about truly helping the consumer making an educated decision. Our law enforcement personnel, men and women, first responders, law enforcement, and military. That's not a cliche. I say at the bottom of my heart. It's all about those guys. And gosh, Jeff, we have some agencies I can't even talk about. We've trained over the years, but we are all about that education and saving lives, whether it's the common U.S. citizen that comes to me for training, comes to TNVC, the law enforcement, top-tier law enforcement group that comes to us, a federal agency comes to us, or the military that comes to us. It's all about us saving lives, and it's all about protecting families and those guys. It truly is my baseline. Nothing has changed. That is a simple formula, a simple recipe for success. Nothing's changed in that regard all these years. Nothing.
Well, it was reassuring to see that from the student's perspective. Like, we kind of moved on from. We still, by request, do our night operations, but we also got a lot of attention for our concealed carry, covert carry, low vis type stuff. So that's been kind of like the meat and potatoes for us now. But it was really nice to go out and work with your team as awesome. And as a student. Like, and I tell this.
I was so honored when you got to go.
Well,
it was like, and I wish I could have made that. I was out of town with business. Like, I knew you're in great hands with Bill.
Oh, absolutely.
I just wish I was there to see that, because that was 17 years in the making since I immersed in it. So here I am having the man I admired so much doing the first night training to come out to my training at TNVC. And how did I do, right? I was telling Bill, we do okay? I said, Jeff, have a good time. I was like,
we had a blast.
Oh, I was like, oh my gosh. I'm like, Jeff Gonzalez is coming to after all these years, is coming to a TNVC little old Vic training.
Well, let me set the tone for this. We also got a chance to take Paul with us out there, and Paul had never had any exposure to night vision. So there was multiple multiple paths of enjoyment and fun for me, because I, number one, got a chance to just be a student in a field that I have a tremendous amount of enjoyment from, that I get a lot of enjoyment from. Then I got to actually watch Paul as he went through his metamorphosis of being able to work at night and be very competent at working at night. And we've gone even, recently we've started doing night hunts. So watching him being able to convert that into night hunts, which in all practicality is as close to a tactical application of night vision that you can get for a private citizen.
Yep.
So, it was a blast. And we did two trips out there. We got a chance to meet the majority of the crew, many of which I've known for a long time outside outside of being a student. Like, we'd seen each other. It's a small training community, all top-notch people.
Yes.
And one of the things that I told Paul is, like, at the end of the day, we'd head back to the hotel. We'd talk about the class and the day and all that other business. And I was, at first I was saying, I was like, wow, you know what? The material they're putting out, with the exception of technology, is so in line with the training that we continue to do. Like, that was
glad to hear
really reassuring
glad
to me.
Hear that. Yep.
I wasn't totally surprised, because I also knew how important it was to you that it would be a center point.
Oh, yeah.
But it was also reassuring, and again, telling Paul, I'm like, no, this is I know this seems, like you said in the beginning, like sitting through that 3-hour brief seems basic and beginnerish, but you have no idea of what they're trying to accomplish in such a small format. Like, your class is 2 nights basically. Our class that we used to do was 4 nights, so
we're cramming a lot in.
It's true. And that's one of the things that I was telling them, like, you really have no idea how much material is being condensed into this 2-day format or 2-night format to get you competent where you're at. So I was thrilled. I was disappointed we couldn't stay for the second part, the extra part. That was a bummer. But the thing that I try to emphasize to Paul, and the whole point of us going out there, was to share this experience with the public, and so they could see it from our eyes, literally, of what we did, both the stuff that we did on the range, plus the practical problems that we did in the buildings and the fields and all that other stuff. Oh, it was a blast. And you have such a great, like, the team is able to take all their skill independently and fuse it into the program, so that you get a little bit of everything, whether it be coming from Bill's, what Bill thinks is ideal, or some of the other staff members, as far as, like, the tips and tricks about movement at night. It was so much fun. Honestly, I was grinning from ear to ear watching Paul go through it.
Progress,
It was a lot of fun. And then being able to see the kind of like the fruits of your labors, like where it started, where it's at right now. There's a lot of other, I shouldn't say a lot. There are a few other training companies that offer night vision training. I don't think they have nearly the capabilities, because you guys have something that they don't, which is the ability to support the student, the end user. So you have the try before you buy program.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, Bill came up with the try before you buy.
Well, when you're dropping a couple $1,000s, why not?
Why not?
Then you also have just the flat out rental program that you can do. You don't have to have any of that.
Yes.
You just come out and just rent everything. And I'm talking about, with the exception of the firearms, pretty much everything you need to be fully functional.
Helmet, mount, night vision.
I mean, and what people don't realize is there's a lot that goes into something like that.
A lot of puzzle pieces.
Oh my goodness. Oh, so much. And we're not just talking about, the helmet, what you wear on your person, but the equipment on your rifle as well. Like, that is another big piece of the puzzle. So, these types of programs you can bring to the table because you did the thing, you did it right. You started with the educational aspect.
Yeah.
You have the surplus of equipment to supply the students, to bring it out there. We had a couple of students in our class that what they brought was probably decent, but through the trials that they were going through, they realized, hey, about that rental program, I'm thinking on day 2, I'd like to try this, and it was like that. They were able to just, the next day we took them out. We might have had to go back to the range and do some re-zeroing. Easy day.
Yep.
They make it so easy to do that. And then now, boom, they're back in the fray. But now, because I've always told this to people in the training business, the secret to your success is not whether or not the student has a positive outcome. It's whether or not they have a positive experience. And if they have a positive experience, that makes a difference. Huge difference.
Yep.
So students are now able to have a positive experience when they come through your program, and all the levels of programs that you're offering, both open and closed. That's a huge thing. What has been so in this? Yeah,
I know we jumped ahead to the training,
we
but
did.
at the infancy, I wasn't. Yeah, there was no training. It was just me getting trained to make sure I wasn't Mr. Potato Head out there, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't help it. We've been teasing the audience enough about it, but during this time period, during the rollout, if you will, what were some of the biggest challenges that you had to deal with?
I think understanding how to grow the business, because I was never formally trained in business.
Oh,
right?
what?
I didn't have a business degree at the time, during that time or anything else, back in the day. And I was formally uneducated in the business, running a business. I never thought about it in a million years. I was a tech guy in aerospace, DOD. That's all I did. And running a business, I never had that formal experience. I never had any type of formal education to tell me how do I run a business? How do I do the accounting?
Yeah.
How do I market, right?
Oh, my God.
You can have the best product in the world, right, Jeff? And how does people know about that unless you market? Well, AR-15 was it for me. That was the platform of the jump leaping board.
Yeah.
And I've heard from Juan and a few others that so many companies have started at ARFCOM and just got their start there.
Yeah.
And it has grown from there.
Yeah.
So I am blessed
100%.
that I was there early on to have my kickstart there. But getting back to your question, it was to a point where I became a dealer on AR15.com and started selling more and more gear, and it was widely popular. Still is today. The millions of hits they get every day.
It's crazy.
It's staggering.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And having a product out there, but even more so, it taught me on ARFCOM that you better have a pretty darn good product, because people could smell the BS a long way away. They can really look through the weeds and see if you really knew what you were doing. And more than that, I started doing, I set up a marketing plan for myself. Okay, I had ARFCOM. Then I had to start doing some of the shows. Went to my first SHOT show. And it's funny, that really scared the hell out of me early on. People don't know, because I had guys like you in special operations community. Here's this night vision guy who, they knew night vision. You guys knew it already. And they would come to the booth early on, my first SHOT show, like Travis, when he first met me, asking me stupid questions. Like, this guy should know that, but just weird vibe, or they're testing the waters to make sure that I wasn't blowing smoke up their skirt, because God knows, and all due respect, some others that are out there, there is a lot of fooling you gung fu companies out there that just put a battery in. How hard can it be?
That's hilarious.
So I would get probed. I know I was.
Yeah.
And I didn't find out till later, until a gentleman who came to me from the special operations community, started working for me, and he laughed because I went to a show with both of them at SOFIC in Tampa early on. And I told him the story, and he goes, you were just getting probed to make sure you weren't full of shit.
Yeah, that's hilarious.
And they were. They knew I was kind of up and coming. They heard my name, but they wanted to see who really what I was like. And they'd ask me the off-the-wall questions like, well, what kind of battery is it used?
Yeah.
And,
can I fit this AAA in there?
Yeah, whatever. Just weird stuff.
Yeah.
But I was getting probed to see that I really knew what I was talking about.
Nice.
And I think the education helped me there. So that was a challenge to get in the industry where I was going to get respected for the gear I was offering, and that we were the real deal, that we weren't just throwing a battery and say, go get it done, without backing it up with our experience and what we have done. So that's why it was so important to me to get that baseline.
It makes sense.
That baseline experience and that expertise, so I can go ahead and grow the company.
Yeah.
Like I said, it wasn't any grand scheme of planning.
Yeah.
It was just to a point where I knew I had to grow the company.
Yeah.
So I started going to more and more shows. I went to SHOT Show.
That makes sense.
Went to SOFIC, and I knew then that the training wasn't going to be about me. There was a transition in the late 2000s, 2010s, where I said, okay, I want to start getting serious now. As the product was growing, our reputation was growing. I was selling more and more product, and we were growing pretty quick. And by 2010, I decided 2012 that all the people it just happened naturally. I was surrounding myself were former special operations guys.
Nice.
Guys are phenomenal.
Yeah.
You're the best of the best. You're the tip of the spear. You're the guys I have to embrace, because you guys are the shit. I know nothing compared to you guys.
Wow.
When you guys duck bullets for a living, right, and shoot bad guys in the face for a living, those are the guys that I wanted, that knew the real world, right? And that was the moment I started attracting more and more of these guys, because I always spoke the truth. I didn't blow smoke up their skirts because they read me a mile away. I already got probed, right?
Yeah.
So one way or the other, I got probed. So I started at that point looking at folks to work with me that were former special operations guys. Yeah. And those are the guys that I wanted. To this day, that's my whole team. I surround myself in a training field with the Rangers and, the SF guys from Rangers and MARSOC and all those guys. I needed those guys to be my foundation of training at the next step of TNVC.
Smart.
And I say this without due respect, but the best training I have ever gotten in the tactical arena, whether it's night vision and training, it's always been from special operations, former special operations. And I'm not saying there's any bad civilian trainers or there's something not to go by that has strictly civilian, no law enforcement, but I think, in my humble opinion, the best training I ever received, and why I have circled the wagon in my training and our foundation, has been law enforcement, SWAT, lots of years, and former special operations. And that is my training cadre.
Yeah,
all
it's
former
brilliant.
Special operations, and all lots of experience in Mike Sebastian. I just got Mike, an
Mike's
amazing
a great
dude.
guy. I love him.
All those years of Chicago PD, bless his heart.
I know.
All the years of nods, 16 years, whatever, 14, 16 years in SWAT, Chicago PD. How can you go wrong embracing a guy like that?
I love him.
He has seen the shit for years.
Yeah. Great guy, and he's now a Texan.
Yeah, he sure the hell is. Yeah, he sure is. He knew I was coming out here. He's a great guy. And so as we went forward to where we're at now, they're all special operation Ranger guys. Bill, he's an amazing guy. Bill is. I wish I had 1,000 of him. Yeah,
no kidding. He's a great guy.
He's amazing. And then Augie, my CEO, Augie Kim. Now,
Augie. That boy,
he's a captain in the reserves, and got his PhD. I mean, I'm Mr. Potato Head of the company. These guys are like well above me in education and what they do, and they've made my life so easy, Jeff. I can tell you, and I know I'm hopping ahead, but my staff, my training cadre, my employees are the best in the world. They are. And I don't say that to sell night vision. I say that because that's in my heart. Yeah. From my warehouse guys, I know them all personally. Yeah. I've had the girls there that work in the admin area. After they have their babies, they put the babies at work there. They're with me. I've had babies on my. I didn't believe a woman should, after the infant's born, should go to daycare. They're right there. I had playpens set up. True story. Playpens set up all over TNVC.
I love that.
A lot of them call me Uncle Vic. Jamie, my VP of admin, Still Sadie, her oldest girl now, she's 8, still knows me probably as Uncle Vic. I had her bouncing on my knee, talking to customers, babies crying in the background. And the latest, Karina, who works for Tom over at Night Goggles, she just had a baby.
Nice.
That boy is now at work, and he'll be in a playpen at work.
Oh,
it's cool.
That.
It's a true family environment at TNVC, and they really are my family.
So you know what I'm hearing from
They're amazing.
Yeah, what I'm hearing from you is that you have created your family, the childhood that you shared, is
my Italian heritage shows.
Yeah,
proudly.
Exactly. It does. It really does.
Good point. It does.
But it's a beautiful thing in a sense because it's where you can get the most out of people. You know, like you said it multiple times. I don't want to go back. I want to be with family. I want to be with family. Yeah. And what you did in this time period is you created a new family for yourself.
I did.
And that family has come out to be, you know, like, again, you're doing great things. You're providing life-saving equipment, but you're also providing life-saving training to use that equipment. And you're doing it in the sense that, you know, like hearing you talk about your employees, there's a lot of people that will talk about their employees because it's a good soundbite. It makes for good PR.
Not me.
Yeah, exactly.
I look you straight in the eye and say they're amazing. They're my family. They're amazing folks. It takes me 6 months to hire anybody because we don't just go on job shop and look for somebody.
Indeed.
We have to collectively decide who we're going to hire.
I love that.
I have them invited to my house. I'm in Nevada now, but they'll come to my house or I'll go visit them.
Yeah.
But nobody gets an interview over the phone. I see them. I talk to them. And we all talk, cook them Italian dinner, whatever.
Nice.
Yeah, every one of my executive personnel have always been to my house, dinner, whatever. And we're close. Our employees are incredibly close to one another.
That to me is the big lesson learned. You know, that's like you were like thinking back to your childhood, bringing that kind of mindset or like that familiarity to your workplace is what has allowed you to create such a strong connection with everybody there and create like I said, a family. That's an amazing thing. It's a beautiful thing.
They're amazing. They're amazing. The cadre I have is amazing.
Okay, so we like to talk about, you know, like you're successful clearly, but it wasn't easy.
No.
And so a lot of times it's easy to just kind of, you know, pat ourselves on the back and talk about all the good stuff, but I typically like to circle back to some of the failures or some of the hard times, the obstacles. Like, what were some of the failures that really kind of like hit you hard that you still figured out how to overcome, but were difficult to overcome?
Early on, I saw the larger companies, the fancy pictures and, you know, the nice photography and the marketing, and it was really polished, right?
Yeah.
And I learned it was tough because I was trying to get to that level. But even to this level, to this day, people says, "Oh, your website looks beautiful," but I never wanted that. I didn't want to be polished like that. Where some, where do I want to use some Fortune 500 night vision company? Right, we're in Forbes magazine. I wasn't not that type of CEO, if you want to call me that. I even hate titles. I'm just not that way.
Yeah,
I'm just still Vic after all these years, but. It was hard for me because I had to show that transition of showing a respectable company that was legitimate versus taking backyard pictures in my home outside of Southern California with my green hilltop with rifles propped up on a brick wall.
I love it.
So it was hard because it was that point. It was also cash flow, right? I couldn't hire big marketing folks like that to go do that, right? I couldn't hire.
Yeah.
So it was a real struggle for me financially because business was good, but you know, I wasn't living in a mansion. I still live in a mansion, but not even close. But we didn't have the cash flow or the expertise to drive the company to that next level.
Yeah.
And it was really tough for me because I saw Rich at Magpul. He was going right to the top. Just zooming, doing everything right.
Yeah.
And the car, but I understood that was a different industry versus
for sure
firearms, and you know when you did the PMAG, and that was rise to the top. Night vision was still a niche, right?
Yeah.
So it was tough, and I still had those other companies that were above me that everybody in this industry already knew, right?
Yeah.
Everybody knew the top 4 or 5 companies, and TNVC was right down there.
Yeah.
And was okay, but it was hard without that business background, without hiring anybody with a business development guy.
Yeah.
It was just me doing all business development. So I didn't have the opportunity to learn and understand that. So I struggled with that for many years to slowly scratch the surface and kind of nip away and learn by watching.
Yeah.
I couldn't hire anybody because I have a lot of money. I couldn't hire the staff. It was all me. It was all on my shoulders.
Yeah.
It was sink or swim again.
Yeah.
You better start looking at people who are doing and starting to learning and adapting and understand how they do things.
Yep.
And so when I hired my first full-time employee, Chip Lasky, great man,
Love Chip.
works at Unity now. So he was my first full-time employee next to my shipping person Teddy, and he had a great marketing background. He was a great artist for what he did. And he we started because of Chip back then.
Nice.
Doing a lot of marketing. Once again, he was used to doing a lot of developmental work and marketing. Well, let's try this, let's do this. And me, I was just a guy that wanted to talk to customers and tell them why they need night vision and understand what they needed and try to help them as best I could.
I love it.
Where Chip came in more of the business end of it, of doing more marketing. Doing more of the graphic illustration stuff and doing a lot of fun stuff like that. And Chip was a real pivotal point for TNVC when he first got hired to get me to that next level.
Did you have like a mentor or a coach during this time period or anything?
It was only Rich getting started, and it was just funny. I always remember talking to you what I needed to do. I did it. Talking to Rich of what I needed to do, and I made that. But after that, there was the special operations guys that I talked to, Travis Haley. Those type of guys that were involved in different type of wars over the years. I learned a lot by talking with those guys to find out how to and just persevere and go through and just be strong and keep working. And it was, I'd work 16 to 18 hours a day. Wow. Taking pictures, doing things, and just trying to get the product to the market could see. But I also had to develop my own product back in the day. I wanted to do things, and I also knew by listening and even watching Fox News as some of the first product I ever came out with was the Riser stock pouch. That's not a night vision product, but I got tired of the guys in Afghanistan taping speed tape onto their pillows on the back of their M14 so they can get their head up, right? So I developed to this day, we still sell it, the Riser stock pouch.
I love it.
That was the very first product I did. And I knew I wanted to do that niche in the market where I wanted to help the law enforcement and military and also the consumers by coming out with good products that haven't been developed yet.
Wow.
Another one had nothing to do with night vision. A lot of people don't know is TNVC back in 2008 or 2010. Did the first drop-in LED replacements for Surefire lights long before Surefire was doing LEDs.
I remember that.
Incandescent 60, 70, couldn't even see the shadows of those lights. Terrible spill. And So I came up with a drop-in LED, at that time.
I think I still have one of those things.
Really?
I think I still do. It was funny. So funny that you mentioned this.
Because I sent them out to people, and that's how it happened. So once again, I relied on yourself, and that's when I got introduced to, God rest his soul, Pat Rogers.
Oh, yeah.
I
love Pat.
I did, and I called Pat up and first time, and I told him who I was.
I love it. Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good information.
So I told him what I was doing, and I needed guys like you to test the product. Because it wasn't put a battery in again and just run with it, right? So it was tough, too, because I was a small guy, and I couldn't use an American company back in the day that wanted LED drop-in modules I designed. I wanted a certain spill, and I did a lot of studies of night studies with white light. And I wanted at least 150 to 200 lumen, which is still low compared to nowadays, but versus 60 lumen that Surefire was putting out, right? Nobody was they're all doing incandescent. Not that Surefire couldn't do the technology; they were so busy with
everything else.
contracts they couldn't get around to developing LEDs. So. I went to Pat. I had in Asia. I got these lights, and I didn't have to build a minimum 10,000. I could build a minimum 100. And we found a company through Optics HQ. Mike, he found the company that could make me these LED drop-ins. Sent a handful to Pat after I tested them. Put thousands and thousands of rounds downrange on a G2 or a light. Dropped it in with a Viking Tactics Lee mount, Kyle Lamb's mount, and I sent it to Pat Rogers. And about 3-4 months later, he put them all in the students' guns. He shot hundreds of thousands of rounds between a half dozen guns or so, and just wrote me an email, Vic, it works, Pat out. And that was the first product that really got me into the lighting aspects. Not night vision, was the LED drop-ins for Surefire lights back in the day.
I was funny. I was looking through. I'm on this kick now. Like every day I throw something away. Just something. It doesn't matter what it is.
Good idea.
Yeah. 30 days. That's what I'm doing. 30 days. So, and so I was just kind of farting around and looking, and I have all these bins and boxes of shit that's just collected over the years. So I opened up one, and I found so many old lights.
I bet.
And I'm like, you know what? I need another light I need a 14th light in the house.
Right,
so I found this bin, right? And I'm like piecing like bodies and bezels and tail caps together. And they were all, most of them all were like original SPs or 6Ps.
Yeah. 6Ps, G2s.
Yes,
yeah.
I had a couple G2s.
The old metal bottle 6Ps, yeah.
Yep. And I found one that still had an incandescent bulb in it.
Wow.
And I was like, well, gotta get rid of that thing.
Yeah.
So I started. I wanted to keep like a little bit of nostalgia. I wanted to go with the metal body because it's like, you know what? This might I remember it might actually be the very first one that I ever got.
Yeah, they were built like a tank. Those 6Ps.
Yeah, they were.
Yeah.
So, and I kind of like cannibalized another one with the LED, and I pulled the LED out. And I'm like at first I was like, okay, I need to find. I know I've got some. They've got to be around here somewheres, and I cracked open a couple of the older ones, and lo and behold, I found one of the LEDs.
Is that right?
Yep.
Still working, I hope.
No, it absolutely does. It does. It's hilarious. It's amazing the difference it does between just. It's also the color. The color was another big change.
It was.
So people don't know that if you're growing up right now in the light world, you don't even know what incandescent looked like. You have no idea.
No idea.
You have no true appreciation for where we're at as far as that is concerned.
So so that was that was the other platform. I wanted to start developing products to help the industry.
It's hugely valuable.
And to this day, we do the same thing. We gather around and said we see a niche, and it's like, oh, we need to improve that.
Yeah.
And it may not even be night vision. Like the LED lights were white.
Yeah.
They had to do it night vision, but I saw the product niche.
Yeah.
And that was well ahead of its time, and it was good because I knew. And everybody knew Surefire and all the big boys were going to come and make their own LEDs.
At some
but
point.
we filled that niche.
Yeah.
And it was great. It was great. It was good for 2-3 years, maybe 4 years. And Surefire started slowly progressing into LEDs.
Yeah.
But us and Melkoff were the only ones doing it at the time.
Wow.
We're doing LEDs. Nobody was doing it. It was all incandescent stuff.
I love it, man. God,
so it's good stuff, And that was the other thing. That was another hardship where I needed to start doing more and more product development. But that takes capital, takes a lot of cash.
It does.
And I was still really, really, really small. The company was small in that regard. So it took a lot of effort to get that off the ground and revenue.
Yeah, I mean.
And I never wanted to go out to investors.
Yeah.
To this day, I don't have any investors. It's just Vic and us. There's no investors. There's no private equity groups. There's no any of those strategic partners we have in that regard. It's just us still to this day. Cash business, and that's how it's been.
I mean, obviously it's successful. But what I think the important takeaway there is like you recognized that one of the, I wouldn't say an obstacle per se, but an opportunity was in product development. Because as you started to become a subject matter expert, you started to also recognize that manufacturers don't always know what they're doing.
No.
Like you have a unique background in the sense that you were part of a no shit Skunk Works division.
Yeah. Best of the best.
Yes. So you have that kind of as your base.
Yep.
So you can recognize that manufacturers will bring something to the market, but not as an end user per se. And there's value in that per se. I'm definitely value in some of that, but man, I cannot tell you. There has to be I'm sure somebody could find some obscure quote or statistic. The number of general issued pieces of equipment that get modified or changed or altered to accommodate the end user in some way, shape, or form. Just about everything I think I was ever issued got something done to it. Something done to it. Let me ask you this. So you have accomplished quite a bit, and we've talked a little bit about some of the obstacles and the lessons learned. But how do you handle failure?
I don't accept it.
Interesting.
I have never accepted failures. I don't think I've ever had a failure yet, and I don't plan on it. I think I'm really good at reading the crystal ball.
Nice.
And as we talked about, you asked me early on in the interview here in our podcast about kind of what made TNVC or the obstacles and things that have come along. It's been a learning, like the divine intervention. If it wasn't for the Airforce, I wouldn't be where I'm at today in TNVC.
Wow. It's
the bottom line, the military, that got me to get to different sectors and different technologies in Lockheed Skunk Works. And even though I didn't have an MBA in business, I understood the manufacturing. It laid the Air Force laid the beginning foundation
Yes.
to everywhere where I'm at today, and all the
Yes.
jobs I've held. It almost like my wife is so brilliant, you know, Paula, and
Yeah.
she's just like she should write a book about my exploits. It's groomed me the foundation that's always been today, and she knows that I've never had a failure like that. I mean, some people would think it was a failure, some of the hardships and things like that.
Yeah.
But I've never looked at failure and ever had that resting on my shoulders. If I did, it was an obstacle, but it was never a failure. I wasn't
like
going
that.
to fail, but I never even thought about that. It's funny you ask that because I've never thought about failing. I never have.
I love hearing this.
I've always thought about failure is only if you accept the failure, and if you don't even think about that and just do your job. And I've never worked a day in my life in 17 years at TNVC. I mean, with all my heart with my employees. I don't work for a living.
Yeah.
I don't fail. I've never done anything that was close to failure. My employees would never let that happen.
Oh,
they wouldn't
that's
come
awesome.
close to letting that happen. I mean, I just never thought about it. It's just, yeah, we have obstacles, but I never had a failure in 17 years of what we've done.
That's awesome.
And if it's a product that didn't sell real well, it failed. We sold some products. The market didn't catch on. A couple of things that we've done over the years.
Yeah.
But no, I don't consider that F word like a reality at TNVC. I just don't. I don't accept it, and I just never had that.
So you hear a lot of people in their interpretation of that, or their maybe they have had a failure and they kind of talk about it. But that's a unique approach towards it, is never really looking at failure as failure.
Yeah.
And I think what really made me smile there was that, my staff would never let me fail. You have built a group of people that
Never let happen.
that you trust so much that they can recognize, and they are your crystal ball.
They'll see a storm 1,000 miles away.
They're your
even
crystal
before I
ball.
will. Yeah.
So they will prevent those types of failures from really even coming up on the surface, if you will. So that's an awesome thing.
It just takes the right group of people to do that and see that, and I have it. I have that group. They're amazing.
I know that's 100% true. Let's start wrapping things up. I've got one final question for you. What's the biggest takeaway that you want the listeners to learn from this show?
I'm still Vic. I still talk to customers on the phone every day.
I love
Can't
that.
today.
Of course.
People think, I get on the phone and they're like, TNVC, this is Vic. And
They
they're
just
like,
think it's another Vic.
no.
Oh, really?
They know.
Oh.
And they're like, Vic, as in Vic, the owner Vic? I'm like, yeah.
I love it.
You're talking to me on the phone? And I'm like, yeah. What's up? And we just talk. And I have made most of my employees, the technical guys, have all come from guys I've met online.
No way.
Yes. I've met them online on AR or some other publication. You have written the book of the AR. It's been either a publisher or something like that, or a contributing technical writer. And I guess the takeaway is we haven't changed much since TNVC started in 2003 out of my dining room.
That's hilarious.
We haven't changed much at all. I'm still very much grounded.
Yeah.
I still have an amazing wife.
Yeah.
I still have an amazing 21-year-old that loves shooting and everything else, who is not spoiled.
Nice.
I was brought up the School of Hard Knocks in Chicago.
Yeah.
I grew up, and I'm still the same guy. I run TNVC, but my employees really run the company.
Yeah.
I am just there to steer the ship.
Yeah.
It's not a yacht. I think it's still a little bass boat that I just kind of steer. And it's my employees who do everything. So just the word to my customers, we haven't changed a bit. We're still about the E word. It's all about education.
Nice.
Nothing's changed. Our training department's still the same way.
Yeah.
We're all about education. And if I look in a crystal ball 10 years from now, I'm still going to be doing the same darn thing.
Love it.
Nothing's going to change in that regard.
I love it. And, I think that the thing that really resonates with me is that nothing's changed about education.
No.
That's what regardless of what the subject is, education is the key. And I feel like when you promote it, when you live it, when you set that example for other people to follow, other companies have followed your model. in a sense, not in the same industry, but there are other companies that have decided, that have recognized, oh, you know what, we can do the same thing.
Yep.
And they do it a little bit differently.
Sure.
But the idea is still the same. We need to educate our customer base. We need to educate them on their, what our capabilities are, so that can better help them truly appreciate what we have to offer.
I mean, God knows when you have to call, what really irks me in the industry, not our industry, but any industry, and you can relate to this, you have to call up on product support somewhere, and you get connected to the Philippines.
Oh, Lord,
and you
don't
get
get me
connected
started.
to Vietnam, and they're reading off a cue card, right?
Don't get me started.
And I've had marketing teams come to me and say, hey, maybe TNVC needs to hire some people, cheap labor to go to answer questions. I said, we don't talk anymore after that, right? That will never happen as long as I'm living and breathing with TNVC.
Yes.
Nobody will read off a cue card. And every one of my employees, does get trained. Every one of the technical staff has to take 2 tactical trainings. I don't care who it's from, accredited training, mandatory every year.
I love
whether
it.
it's night vision, whether it's tactical firearms training, whatever it is, mandatory twice a year every year.
I love it.
It has to, and we have to have a foundation. But I can't imagine somebody calling TNVC reading off a cue card. Never happened.
Yeah.
It
Well,
bugs
good for
me.
you. Good
Yeah,
for
yeah.
you. Good for you. All right. Where can people learn more about you or more about TNVC?
So our website, obviously.
Yep.
Pick up the phone and call me and ask for me. I'm on the phone all the time and talk to anybody. I
love that.
Just like I'm talking to you, I talk to my customers the same way. But
God, I love that.
TNVC, and as we talked about, we have our sister company. You had Tom Austin on, my director of Night Goggles, NGI, which is a sister company that deals with more of the commercial hunting crowd.
Yep.
It was a big decision a while back. Do we formulate and merge both those companies together? And I said, no. I want to keep segregation between the tactical community, the high end, where folks may not need the latest generation Gen 3 or panoramic goggles or unfilmed stuff from L3, and they just need some thermal hunting gear and some night vision.
So true.
Night goggles was it. It's the recreational commercial crowd that may not need the $4,000 top tier unfilmed L3. They might just need a lower grade Gen 3 and still get the job done for hunting critters or some thermal device to go hunt some environments that Tom talked about.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think that was a brilliant idea, because I think it would have only, I don't want to use the word cheapen, but I think it would have watered things down, and it probably wouldn't have allowed for you to be the best customer service. Now you have focused customer service on the challenges that the customers are providing.
And I learned that funny story. I always give this example, and it's hilarious, that TNVC always wanted to stay in their lane. High-end night vision, high-end for the tactical user with a law enforcement, military, U.S. consumers, U.S. citizens. And then we wanted night goggles to do more of the commercial. Yeah. But I never wanted, I grew up in Chicago eating great Chicago hot dogs and pizza, right?
Oh,
but
man.
right? And it's on my waistline, on visit. I might be out to here by that time if I lived out there. So I always talk about staying in my lane. It's the greatest hot dog joint in Grand and Pulaski called Jimmy's Hot Dogs in Chicago. You Chicago people listen, you know that place.
Yeah.
Jimmy's Hot Dogs, Grand and Pulaski. Been there since 1954. Only sells hot dogs and these goofy tamales and polo sausages and the greatest French fries since 1954. They haven't added pizza. They haven't added hamburgers. They haven't added anything.
Yeah, they haven't diversified.
They haven't.
Yeah.
They kept in their lane.
Yeah.
So I thought about that when Night Goggles was really formulating, coming up through the ranks. I decided, no, I'm not going to water the waters here. I'm not going to, water down our product.
Yeah.
I want to stay in our lane and sell the top tier gear for TNVC.
Yep.
And then NGI can stay in their lane and sell their gear, what they do best. So that was, I used it, hot dogs and French fries is how I talked about TNVC of not diversifying. Stay in my lane. Do what we do best.
I love it. All right, folks. Well, that's a wrap. Thank you, Vic,
Thanks,
for coming out.
I appreciate it, brother. Thank you very much.
I really appreciate it. I want to thank our audience for tuning in. I want to thank our sponsors that help make this happen. I want to thank the men and women holding the line. You can check out all our previous podcasts by visiting bulletproofworkshop.com. You can learn more about me and training opportunities by visiting tridentconcepts.com. Until then, I'm Jeff Gonzalez. You're listening to the Bulletproof Workshop podcast. Stay safe or be dangerous.
Thank you.
My pleasure.